I'd like it in Spanish next time.
We're going.
Welcome, everybody, to the June 7th, 2022 City Commission Work Session. Thank you all for watching in TV land, and thank you to everybody that's here in the audience tonight. Staff, thank you, staff, for coming. Mr. Wiley, would you like to call the roll?
Commissioner Rocky Smith. Here. Commissioner Adam Marl.
Here.
Commissioner Frank O'Donnell.
Here.
And Commission President Denise McGriff.
I am here. So we are going to talk very briefly about future agenda items, and I'd like to turn that over to the very competent Mr. Tony Conkle.
Good evening. Thank you. Evening, commissioners. You have the upcoming work session items. I think that there are two things that we've had meetings about or discussed that aren't reflected here. One would be with Commissioner Marl about incorporating youth committees,
Yes.
youth into our committees in some form. Commissioner Marl and I have met a couple times to discuss that, as well as he's done a lot of work putting together a potential program. So I would imagine bringing that sooner rather than later for a discussion with the commission. And then the other thing that's not reflected on here would be to bring back the parking study that we just had a work session on, as we know that there were some questions related to that. So if you'd like to send in questions prior, that would be great. Otherwise, we would be bringing it back for a discussion, mainly focusing on addressing the commission's questions that they may have about that parking study that we worked through the other night.
The one that we just
Yes.
looked at.
Yes.
I'm kind of wondering on that particular topic, did we really get through everything in the study?
We got through what was going to be presented that night. So I guess if there are other things that you would like to review, we can do that during the work session.
Well, that would be the rest of it then. As was noted, several people got excited about the article in the Oregon City News and wanted to know whether that was part of the study. And I said, yes, there were some suggestions, but not specifically amounts or anything of that sort. And I said, it's part of the overall review, but we did not talk about that. I think we go through the rest of the study, that may come to light and we may end up talking about it further. I know that there are opinions on both sides, maybe more on one side than the other, but I think it will behoove us to talk about it.
That's all I have, unless there are any other questions.
Probably one of the things that is at least on the top of my list right now, not necessarily on this list, but after talking with Mayor Walters, we wanted to see about getting regular quarterly meetings with our two cities on our calendars so that we can plan ahead. As you know, there are other topics that are of mutual interest to both of us, including most obviously, South Fork. There's the whole issue of houselessness, homelessness that we could be talking about. I know she's interested in that as well as Councilor Baumgardner. We've talked a little bit about our respective school districts, which is interesting since they're right now involved in litigation. But in deference to your discussion about the youth council, I'm wondering if that is something that we want to have a brief discussion with the school board, since they might be involved. I mean, the youth don't all have to come from the schools there, but there's other areas. But I'm just wondering if there's any interest in us meeting with the Oregon City School Board. I know that we're going to have a new superintendent coming on, and that might be a good introduction for us to talk with her, find out what's on her radar. I got one yes, and
I'm
yes for
open
me.
to it.
Yeah, I'm open to looking at it, and
Because
But I don't know
if I
how
can
broad.
get some direction,
Yeah.
if this
Well-
is something that the commission is interested in, both meeting quarterly with West Lynn as well as meeting with the whole school board. Traditionally, it's been the superintendent, the city manager, and usually the mayor and a commission member from the city and I'm not sure if they have a board chair.
Yes,
but
they do,
two
and a vice
members
chair.
there. But if that's something the commission's interested in, meeting whole commission to whole school board.
we can talk about it further about some agenda items. I've been approached by 2 different school board members over the last year about that, and I know it was something I wanted to do before Superintendent Didaway retired and moved on to the other school district, and we just never quite got it together. But I'll get back to you on that. It's just, if I come up with some items, and I can talk to Commissioner Morrow and also Commissioner Smith about where we have mutual issues. I know one of the things I was a little concerned about while I was on the Planning Commission was where they are looking at placing new schools, if they are going to do that. And we definitely want to make sure that they are not outside the UGB, that we look at, talking to them. I don't believe they have a really good concept of how special districts work with statewide land use planning. Because in talking to some of them over time, they would look at me like, what are you talking about? And I said, well, there's a special district section, and this is how we all relate to each other, and the jurisdiction and these special districts, fire, and all the other ones. I said, they all are part of this process. So I piqued somebody's curiosity. So that's all I was thinking about. And then other than that, looking at your list, I don't know if it's particularly a work session item, but I wrote down on the first page under C, prior to Ms. Turway leaving, we were supposed to be creating an NROD area in Kanema. It had all the work had been done. Did we ever do that? I don't know whether we ever did it. Somehow or another, it came up while I was reading something else. And then we have on this list, you also have ethics training, which of course I think would be good. Not just for us, but I think all of our boards and committees. That's all I had on my top 40.
I'll say a couple things. I'm in favor of quarterly meetings with West Lynn. We share too many commonalities that we need to work together on, many of which are those which are imposed upon us by state governments, and we need to stand together. And there's things I want to discuss with them. And quite honestly, and maybe this is an exec session thing, but do we need to join together and see if there's an opportunity to file a suit about this 205 tolling? Because I'm absolutely, the more we can talk and talk, and meantime, the thing progresses. The school board, I actually wanted to go see them as a citizen, because I know when they put forward that last bond measure, they led with school security. And I don't know if I want to talk about that in a public venue, but I'd like to see an assessment of what they've accomplished, because that's been a great concern to me, especially with recent events. So maybe that's an exec session thing, or maybe not in the public eye.
Yeah.
Those two things are on my mind heavily.
All right. Then probably the only other thing I had a question about was we're looking at a joint work session with the Park and Recreation Advisory Committee. Is that to deal with what we're talking about with the Parks Master Plan, or other issues that are hanging out there, or opportunities that are hanging out there that we can discuss with them?
It's for Clackamas Park.
Or what?
Clackamas Park Master Plan.
Oh, okay. Well, wouldn't hurt to talk about the entire master plan process,
I don't think we're in a
I've got
place to talk
another.
about that right now. We're still getting started.
right?
This is to focus on Clackamas
I have
Park.
one more.
Sure.
At some point, I'd like to revisit what we're going to do with the old Public Works building. It's kind of fallen off the radar. There was promises made about relocations and reassignment of it and what to do with it. And, those things, they fall off our radar. And I think we need to have an open discussion where we're at and what are we going to do about it.
So Center Street property.
Center Street property, exactly.
I suspect that Mr. Lewis is not watching while he's on vacation, but we'll make him aware of that.
Well, I call him up and tell him what I just said.
We're going to hold the meeting for just a moment while we call Mr.
Let me call him up. Let me make his day.
Well, at least he'd know we were thinking about him. I mean, that's something that's positive right
we'll
there.
just leave it at that. Yeah,
Yeah.
we were thinking about him.
Well, we are thinking about him. All right, well, let's move on to the next item, which is, so gentlemen, before we move on to the next item, does anybody want to change the order of these discussion items? Because I certainly do. But I will bow to your,
Well, what's your proposal, so we understand?
what's my proposal? Okay,
Some of
so,
them are going to be lengthy.
yes, and I wanted to get since the first three things deal with one department, I would like to do the trees, because I think that's going to be relatively easy, in my opinion. I've looked at it, and I want to just tell NRC, go forward and do good things.
Well, I've looked at it, and I've got one question about the barrier that goes 20 feet, and how is that installed? I didn't understand the drawing,
Well, let's do it.
Okay, let's do it.
but I think we can do that one fairly quickly, and the others are going to take time.
Aquila, are you ready? Just hang tight, Mr. Bram. And you guys have a meeting coming up, don't you?
Tomorrow.
Tomorrow, okay. Because I'm looking forward to that recommendation coming.
Yeah, I have two.
I have unfortunately, a vested interest in that. Not financially, just morally.
Yeah. Thanks. Can you give it to me? I better put my, okay. Glasses would probably be a good thing.
First of all, thank you for all your work on this. I know this was not an easy task, and it's something that needed to be done, but thank you for getting to it.
It took us a while. It took longer than I thought it was going to take, but
Doesn't it always?
yeah, and then we had everybody else, we had to listen to everybody else and things.
All right.
But, okay.
Take it
So,
away, please.
I'm Nancy Brochot, so I'm the chair of the NRC, and this is Sam Wolf, who is the vice chair. And before we even start, I just want to say that the actual list of what trees should go where is almost completely due to Sam's work. She did a ton of legwork and talked to a ton of people, but I'll let her talk about that when we get to that slide. So our purpose, we're going to give you a little bit about the background, why we did this. We're going to present our...
I think we know.
I think it came from you, actually. You came to our meeting and told us to do it, so. But we're going to present our recommendations, and then, be up to you as to what next steps you want to take. So the last time the street tree list was updated was in 2013, so it's pretty old. Generally, they get updated at least every 10 years, if not sooner. In summer 2021, the City Commission asked us to review the street tree list. Part of this was due to all the sidewalk issues that were going on and the litigation and stuff. So the initial push was to actually look at and figure out what trees should go in what spaces in terms of the width of the parking strips. But we also were directed to take into consideration the effects climate change are going to have in the future and try to project what trees would survive better with climate change and remove some trees and put other ones on in relation to that. We also added the fact with pests because, and we'll talk a little bit when we get to the list, but for example, we took ash trees completely off our street tree list because the emerald ash borer, which is an invasive species that hit the East Coast. It's in the Midwest, devastating all their ash trees. I believe it's in Colorado, but it's heading this way. And so within 10, 15 years, it'll probably be here, and it pretty well kills every ash tree around, which is going to be devastating for just our riparian areas, but we have a lot of street trees that are ash, that won't work either. We also, so we wanted to get species that wouldn't damage the sidewalks to make sure that the right trees in the right place. We also wanted to look at some other, the standard planning detail, and we made some suggestions. And so with regard to cement barriers, we're not going to talk about that tonight. That was pretty well decided by city staff members, but we did put input into that in terms of what's going to happen with that. So we started discussing this in August of 21 at that meeting, and we finalized it in February 22. And I know I sent in a memo to all of the city commissioners, but they decided we needed to do a work party. So Sam, I'm going to let her talk about this because, again, she did the bulk of this work. So thank you.
So yeah,
So Sam, you want to just introduce yourself again?
Yes, sir. So hello, I'm Samantha Wolf, Oregon City resident and also vice chair of the NRC. I have a strong background in urban forestry, and I sit on the Oregon Community Trees committee that has provided some grants to OC in supporting Arbor Day events. So we have a strong partnership, and so I want to provide my expertise to Oregon City. So I've reached out to a number of contacts in relation to in relation to OCT. And because of my relationship with these people, I was able to get the best of the best information. I reached out to two people in ODF. ODF has a wildfire program with an expert arborist, and also the ODF's Urban and Community Forestry Assistance Program that particularly focuses on urban forestry. I also reached out to our own neighbors at Extension and others I also looked at street tree lists from neighboring cities as well as far south cities, trying to anticipate trees that we might incorporate into our own street tree list that might have more climatic adaptations similar to those in Ashland. So we can kind of anticipate what trees would be surviving 20, 30 years from now. And I also looked at the metro regional list. Okay, so looking at climate change, we can expect that things are not going to stay the same. We expect that we are going to have more extreme weather events, both hot and cold and wet. We're also going to expect that they're going to have an impact on our trees. So we want to look at our street tree list, see which trees tend to fare best in these extreme situations, and make sure that we add those to the list, and then take out the species that did not do well, that are not tolerant, that are not resilient to those extreme events. And we also, like Nancy said, looked at what sort of pests or diseases that are prevalent in those canopies and what are not going to survive in 20 years or now, that tend to fail more often than not, and also looking at what street trees sizes are best suited to a given planter size. So right tree, right place. And we also looked at trees that tended to be overplanted. So if anyone's curious, they looked at the Portland Street Tree Urban Forestry Report. Predominantly across the United States, maples are overplanted. Everyone loves maples. They're beautiful. They tend to be about 50 to 80% the canopy. And any good ecologist knows that too many of the same species in one spot is going to be vulnerable to pests. And there is a pest. It's, I think it's the Asian longhorn beetle that is not yet here in Oregon, but is expected to be here alongside the emerald ash borer. So we want to take that into consideration with the street tree list. Okay, next slide. Okay, so we have a variety of planter widths in Oregon City. We decided to add 10 options instead of requirements or recommended trees to the 2.5 foot or 3 foot smaller widths. My understanding is those planter strips tend to be very tight and don't support high canopy, large canopy trees, especially given the heat island effects that tends to be surrounding those trees. So with advice from the city staff, we recommended that instead of requiring that any trees that come out of those planter widths, that we just provide an option of list of trees that would be suitable, can tolerate, can grow well there, but not require it since they tend to fail or not do well.
So say that again.
So within these particularly small planter strips, we recommend that we have 10 options of trees. We did edit the list to take out those trees that are not suitable for that size and did add tree species that are best suited for that planter width. So the options that are available on the list I provided are best suited for that planter size. We also edited the planter width strips within the 3 to 4 foot widths. And we edited the list for all the others as well. So I don't need to read the slide to you, but we've made substantial edits to all 5 categories. Yes, please.
Okay, so basically, one of the big changes we made, and this went back and forth because we had the list of trees that we thought would be good for that 2.5 to 3 foot, and a lot of the city staff was really concerned about having people plant in there because there is a potential, I mean, with any street tree, there's a potential to have sidewalk issues, but because it's so small. And so we decided that rather than have a list of required trees, these are optional trees if somebody wants to plant it. The problem is that if, and the recommendation we want to make is if the planter strip is less than 3 feet, 3 feet or less, that if the person has a tree in there and has to take it down for whatever reason, that they not be required to replant a tree. It's their option if they want to from that list, they could put something in there, but that we not require them to plant because it's such it's almost a hostile environment for trees. You have to really be going to take good care of that tree or it's not going to survive. We also wanted to recommend that the city not force people, because I know right now if you don't replant, you have to replant a tree somewhere else on your property. The vast majority of these, it may be all of them, nobody was quite certain, but the vast majority of these really small planter strips are in the McLaughlin neighborhood. And I live in the McLaughlin neighborhood. I have a 3-foot planting strip, so I have 2 trees in it, one which is way too big. But we decided to not tell people they have to plant a tree elsewhere on their property. A lot of lots in the McLaughlin neighborhood are really small and they don't have room for another tree, or they already have a big tree on their lot. If you told me I had to plant a tree somewhere on my lot, I have no place because I have a little mini forest as it is. I mean, if there's a room for a plant a tree, I've already got one there. And so we thought it was kind of onerous to ask them. And then, the other thing would be to pay a fee. But if they can't plant a tree, then it seems like a burden on the citizens to have to pay a fee in lieu of the fact that they can't plant a tree anywhere. So we would like to see the wording, the legislation change so that if it's 3 feet or less, you're not required to replant a tree, you're not required to plant it on your property, and you're not fined. I know that in many cases, the reason a lot of those are so small is because the streets were widened in the McLaughlin neighborhood. Before I moved, I've been in my house for almost 40 years, and so it was before I was there, but the street in front of my house is really wide, and the block up is not as wide. I was hoping when they repaved my street this summer that they would actually give some of the green space back to reduce water, but it's still really wide, so.
Almost all the right-of-ways in the plat of McLaughlin are 60 feet, so it just means that they weren't created to the full width, but it's always been there.
Right.
I guess the only objection I would have to what you're saying is that I don't like the statement that you made, and I'll be honest with you, for whatever reason, we have had a number of trees removed in McLaughlin and other places in the city for no good reason, large trees that didn't have to be taken out, and we need to have some criteria of some sort, some reason. I mean,
Right.
it can't be just because I don't like the tree or I want to take it out.
Well,
If we're going to keep taking trees out and not requiring replanting, we're just going to have more heat.
Right. If, the thing is that most of the trees in these right-of-ways are really small. And so, I mean, I think there's already, and I'm just saying to waive the penalty for just those small parking strip areas, the 3 foot or less, not for all of Oregon City. I agree that way too many trees are getting cut down. I think most all of the big leaf maples are gone, pretty much. They just have been butchered lately. But it's only for those really small parking strips. And so if the parking strip, we don't want to require that they plant in there because we can't make any kind of guarantee that those trees will survive and or not mess up the sidewalk. And so I would just like, just for those small 3 foot or less parking strips to not require them, and that was, the city staff was pretty adamant. They didn't even know that they wanted us to recommend planting something there. We looked at shrubs, the problem with shrubs, and they work well in some places, but they have to be a certain distance from corners and intersections, or they can block traffic, and or they have to be pruned correctly, and you can't always get people to prune trees correctly anyway, so that it just kind of got kiboshed, the shrub issue. We do have some shrubs on our recommendation lists, but again, they have to be placed in the right place. You can't put them too close to the corner, or you've got people who can't get a clear view when they're pulling out in traffic. So I don't know if I mean, I'm totally against just randomly cutting trees down. So if we're talking about cutting a tree down for no reason, I would be against that. But if you have to take a tree down, it dies, or you know,
We've gotten arborists to say just about anything that the homeowner wants
yeah.
to take them out. So let me ponder this some
Okay.
more. I won't belay this anymore. I'll think about it some more and talk to some of our tree people, I support you on the fee in lieu.
Right.
But we've got to have better criteria. I know in McLaughlin, because we've got clay soil, we've got a lot of, when the streets were paved in McLaughlin back in the day, they took all the stuff from the street, put it in the parking strips. So you've got rubble, you've got hard pan, you've got clay soil. So I mean, maybe there's some other thing we can look at to make this work so that it's not, oh gee, my sidewalk lifted 1/8 of an inch, now I got to take my tree out.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I had a neighbor
There may
who's,
be some, besides the small parking strip, some physical, environmental, like the soil. I know I had to put soil into the holes that I dug because it was hard pan.
yeah, in front of my house, it's literally gravel.
So,
My garden in front of my house is gravel, and I've been in there a long time. I've been building the gardens up, but I dig down very far at all, and I just hit rocks and gravel and stuff, so.
too bad we can't grow rocks.
I know. I like rocks, but. So anyway, that was our recommendation. And so, you know, that's in your court. So you get to decide what to do with that recommendation. The other thing was that we would really like to see a tree inventory done of the city. Like Sam was saying, we made a supposition that there are a large percentage of maples, but we have no data that supports that other than just driving around and seeing that there's a lot of maples in the city. So we kind of put the maples in what we call the hiatus. We're going to put them in a back burner for maybe 5 or 10 years and then maybe put them back on the list if we don't have a maple pest by then. But having a tree inventory would really be beneficial to the city in terms of knowing what trees we have, what the species diversity of those trees are. And tree inventories usually take into account the status, the health of the trees. And so at any point in time, you can look up, somebody says they want to remove a tree, but it was perfectly healthy when we did the tree inventory 3 years earlier. You can go, well, what happened to it? So I think it gives us a little bit more, and we've tossed the idea out of actually seeing if the city could possibly hire a city forester who would also have a background in arborist type background. But because we talked about doing a inventory, I think a year ago, and it just became It would have to be completely voluntary basics. It's really hard to train people to know the trees well enough. I know the native trees, but you put me in a horticultural place and I don't know what half of them are, so. And so we just really need somebody, and it became obvious that we couldn't do it without a lot of input from city staff. So it wasn't just up to us to do. We tried to figure out ways we could do it and get volunteers, and we had some ideas, and we had people come and talk to the committee, but it just seemed like there was actually no real way to do it without a lot of city input. And so having a city forester who could lead that and be in charge and talk to everybody else in the city who needed to have that information or needed to know what was happening. Because we need somebody to do the GIS work, and we need, it's all these other people were involved that we just didn't have access to do that.
Sounds like a project for the neighborhood associations. Years ago, when we had a community development block grant, we needed to do a city inventory about where the sidewalks weren't and were, and the neighborhood association stepped up and went around. Some people took a block and then they marked it on a map, and so we had some good idea about where the sidewalks needed to be replaced, and, might be a little project.
We do have a list, I'm not sure how, I think it's maybe about 10 years old now, but there were 2 women who lived in the McLaughlin neighborhood who went around and measured and marked the location of a lot of the trees.
Probably one of them.
Yeah, so I have that list somewhere. Dee Dee was asking for it, I gotta find it, and so, but yeah, so our directives are, if we can get the street tree list, and what we'd like is for that 2.5 to 3 foot, maybe have an asterisk on it, that trees are not required for that. And for all of the list, it should somewhere at the top, when people are selecting trees, say, planting, any street tree can raise your sidewalk. So they need to realize that that's a possibility. And if you see it early enough, you can go in and a lot of times remove a root and get that to stop if you catch it in time. So we'd like to see the adoption of the street tree list. We'd like to get the staff to proceed with that adoption and look at the other recommendations that we made. You guys have to make that decision initially. And then if you have specific feedback for our committee in terms of what you think we should do different, or if you have questions or you want other issues looked at, please let us know.
Commissioner O'Donnell, you had a question about the diagram.
Yeah, I will. First, I'll say that I would approve those first 2 recommendations on your list about less than 3 feet, no requirement to replant. Yeah, I'm fine with those. The third one, I'd have to ask myself what the value is and what the cost is. I did read in the report that it said most of those municipalities just did contracts. They didn't have people on staff, and I'm very sensitive to the cost of adding to staff and the benefit of it, especially since we get involved with the benefits, which you don't incur when you just do it on contract with somebody. So the third one is up for debate, but the first 2, what I don't want is I don't want to be I don't want somebody 30 years from now to be where we're sitting today having to deal with lifted sidewalks.
Right.
So the question that the mayor did ask me, if you go back to the list, some engineer drew up this diagram of,
Do we have a picture of that on here?
I gotta find it,
Can you bring it up, Jacob?
got my
It's,
hard copy of it.
The attachment,
the planting detail.
planting detail, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it's Public Works standard drawing.
Well, it may be a standard drawing, but the note says,
Yeah,
I'll look
that's
for
it,
it.
thank you.
Note 4, as a root barrier shall be placed abutting all sidewalk edges. So, and it's 12 inches from the back of the curb. The curb would be closest to the street, right? That narrow, that's the curb. So 12 inches back from that, I got to do this. And I got to do it on every sidewalk edge.
This is only for new development. So where they're putting in new developments and new sidewalk, this would go in. Most of those areas have much, I can't remember what the minimum, I think it was a 5 or 6 foot planting strip rather than,
So if somebody's replanting a private party, they're not bound by this?
right. This is only for new construction,
Because
new
I look
new
at this and
neighborhoods.
it tells me that this barrier, which is 24 inches deep,
Right,
is 20 feet long.
right.
That's quite an achievement to dig that kind of ditch. That's a ditch witch kind of thing, long and narrow. So I didn't want to stick people with, I'm replanting and now I gotta,
Yeah, oh yeah, this would be
it's
horrible.
crazy, yeah. I mean, I got no problem with contractors first putting the trees in to
Yeah.
do this.
Yeah, this is in new construction where they're building new streets and everything. So part of when they're
Okay.
building the new streets and sidewalks, they're putting these barriers in the parking strips before they put the soil back in and plant anything. So this is not for existing homeowners to have
Because
to
that
deal
would be
with.
quite a burden to
Maybe it
dig
should
that.
say that on the drawing.
I just don't want some bureaucrat at some future point telling some poor person coming in and saying, you got to dig a ditch 4 inches wide, 20 feet long, and 24 inches deep, and you got to put it on both sides of the thing. And it's like,
Right.
I'm selling my house before I do that.
Yeah,
Mr. O'Donnell, I can tell you that when I replaced the tree that was causing some
Yeah.
problems at my property, I did put in a root barrier, but it was only probably 3 feet long for the hole.
Yeah.
And it's been working well. It was approved by Mr. Conkle when he was Community Development Director. So I have one.
Let's make a note of that for the future. I just, I look at trees and I mean, they're going to search for water and most times they're going to go toward the lawn where people are watering. So I don't take issue with the tree selection. It looks thoughtful. I don't want to put them in narrow parkways because I think we're just asking for it. And I don't want to penalize people that are trying to abide by the law. And, one thing you didn't mention, it came up in our discussions about if you replaced it, I don't know what the nature of the tree is, where you have to put it on your title. It's a $90-some fee. I don't want people to incur, your study didn't deal with that.
right.
But in certain trees, you had to go put them on your title and it was a county fee and it was in excess of $90, another burden. But that's for us to discuss about what to do
Right.
about that.
Yeah, that was not
Yeah.
ever brought up.
I think your
We didn't
work
talk
was
about that.
thoughtful and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Any questions, gentlemen?
First, thank you for all of this great work. I really appreciate it. And yeah, it's very obvious that you guys know what you're doing. So first question for Mr. Conkle. Can you refresh my memory as to what the current process is for street tree removal right now?
So there's multiple processes. I think it depends on, we've got a program right now if you have lifting sidewalks. And then we just have another process if you just want to take a tree out. So two different processes, but right now we have the program where we have lifting sidewalks. So you can remove the tree. You then, that is eligible for reimbursement along with the replacement of the panels. And then right now, what our municipal code says is you need to replant a tree in the planter strip, replant a tree somewhere in the city, replant a tree on your property, or pay fee in lieu of, and you get to pick one of those. Similar process for if someone just wanted to take out a tree because it was dead, dying, diseased in the planter strip itself. So
Would it have to be dead, dying, or diseased for someone to pursue that route?
no,
Okay. That's what I thought.
correct, Aquila, right,
That's
yeah.
correct.
We don't have something that says it has to be dead, dying. What that does start to impact is potentially some of the mitigation measures.
Right.
So if it's dead, dying, disease, I think it's a 1-to-1 replacement. If it's a, 20-inch tree caliper, and it's healthy, then you start to get into potentially some mitigation requirements that exceed that 1-to-1 replacement ratio.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted a refresher there, because I do, like Commissioner O'Donnell said, I think that what the NRC is proposing for the replanting is reasonable, and I just wanted to, as I was thinking about that, to make sure I had the context of what we're currently doing for the removal itself before we get to the replanting. So thank you.
And I do appreciate your remark about making sure people know that that requirement or that 20-foot barrier is new construction only and should be noted as such in that document.
Aware of is that the community will get a copy of the report about the tree or the permit. And I was the only one that supported trees in the public right-of-way being a part of the public right-of-way, because to me, in the parking strip is still part of the public right-of-way. So sometimes there's a review, sometimes there isn't. But what I have found is that there seems to be some conflict. So you have a company that has an arborist. We need to have some criteria on what we're talking about when we say somebody's an arborist. And then that person is turning around saying this tree needs to be removed, and they're the ones removing it. So to me, there seems to be some sort of conflict in terms of, one hand's washing the other hand. And I don't know how to really deal with that. But I know that arborists are supposed to have some sort of a certification, and we should basically require that, so it isn't just somebody who works for a tree company and says that they're an arborist without knowing that that we're reading somebody's report that has credentials. And I think that's really important. And we do have some here in Oregon City that, are credentialed, and they definitely, when you look at their material, it's right up front, here's my license, blah, 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 blah. And other people, I could sign it, I don't know anything about that. So that's something that concerns me, because we're getting conflicting reports that come in, and you look at it and they said, we had one where 4 times until they got it right. Well, I don't think they got it right personally, but so that's just one thing I want to bring to your attention. So when do we anticipate this is going to be coming back?
Well, I guess first I'd like to clarify what you'd like us to bring back. Is it the NRC's recommendation that was presented on the slide?
Sure.
Okay.
And is this going to be adopted by ordinance, resolution? How are we going to do
So the
this?
recommendations they're making would be code changes.
Okay.
So I'm not sure when it comes back. I need to kind of go back and program that and look at how that will run through, and then it would be an ordinance change. I'll probably want to check in with our assistant city attorney, because the tree codes get connected in with the land use code, so
And
we'll want to
Public
see what
Works and
process that
everybody else,
actually
and parks.
is. Correct, yeah.
Okay, all right.
I would say one other thing.
Oh, please.
Just as during the construction phases, there's an inspection at the foundation, there's an inspection at framing. I wouldn't mind seeing an inspection called for to make sure this barrier trench is dug and in place and the barrier's there. You're on site, you walk through, you look at it, yes, it's there.
And we're not close to fire hydrants, water meters.
Yeah, that we comply in
light
every way.
poles, whatever else is out there that, because unfortunately in the past, it's been sort of an afterthought. The trees get put in and then we didn't.
Right, that's why
we're having the
we're,
problems we have now, so.
yep, that's why we are where we are.
Hey, that's great. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
We appreciate it. Thank you for all the work. And I will say the other tree I know that got put in a lot of them was Chanticleer pears.
Yeah.
I have 2 of them in front of my house, and my next door neighbor had 3, and I put them in because I wanted them to match, and it was on the list at the time. And, they did okay in the storm. They don't look as nice as they used to, but we had them trimmed up by a company that knew what they were doing. And the other thing I've discovered in the neighborhoods, people plant dogwoods in their parking strip, and that's not a street tree. So we need to do some more education about, like you say, right tree, right place.
Right, and so our list should reflect
I think Dogwoods were on there, but I think did they get kiboshed? Or are they on the hiatus list? She knows the list
Yeah,
better
and
than
what was
I
the
do.
maple that you were referring to?
We just, maples in general, there were a
It
few
wasn't
that
the
we
big leaves. I
allowed.
know when I was planter, we planted, I can't think of the name of it, but they were,
Norway.
yep, that's right, Norwood
That's the
maple.
invasive
Thank you
one.
for remembering that. They were everywhere.
Yeah, I think that's what is in front of, on my Jackson Street side. And my neighbor had 3 or 4 going up the street, and during the ice storm, they took horrible damage, so.
This was mostly all new subdivisions. I don't believe that was one that we planted in.
This was,
In the street trees we did with Friends of Trees. It was
yeah, the
Norwood
trees that I have, the maple tree I have and the ones that were there, when I first moved in, within the first few years, so it was like the mid-'80s, the county was offering a plan that if you just said you wanted trees, you could pick trees and they'd put them in. And so those have been in there for quite a while. And I know they put a lot of, I'm not sure what kind of a maple it is, but it's pretty, but it's,
Well,
yeah.
it wasn't us, so good. We can
No,
blame
no,
that
it
on-
wasn't, it
we can
wasn't
blame
the
that on
city.
county.
It wasn't Friends of Trees.
So just to clarify, there are a couple maples on the list still.
Yes.
For those people that really just want a maple. And those maples have been specifically vetted as particularly tolerant to any pests, which is the reason we
Put them in.
put the majority of maples on the hiatus list. So you have 2 lists in front of you. You've got the recommended planted list, and then for staff internal use, we have a hiatus list.
Okay.
And that's where you will find the trees that we potentially could put back in the rotation if, when we have an inventory and we know what trees we have and what our breakdown looks like, we can be more intentional with what our canopy diversity looks like, so that we can then decide with data informing that decision, yes, we have adequate diversity,
Sure.
we can add certain maples back in.
Great.
So you have the accepted maples that are not invasive still on the hiatus list.
Okay.
But those maples that, for those diehard maple fans, they've got them. We have a couple that are still available.
Good. Okay.
We
Thank
also
you so
would
much
like
again.
to see if maybe, one of our recommendations that I don't think we made it may be up there on list, but one of them was to have the street tree list reexamined at least every 10 years. Because, things change rapidly. We learned a lot in that 116-degree heat of what trees didn't survive or really bore the brunt of it, and which ones crumbled in the ice storm.
We're saying it should 5 or less. I mean,
Yeah,
it
that's
seems
what we're
like it
thinking.
should come up on a
Yeah,
work plan.
Yeah, it really needs
Yeah.
to be reexamined
Yeah.
frequently,
Yeah.
so.
Well, then put it in 5 years. We'll support that.
Okay, good.
Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, back to the top of the pops here. Shall we take number 1, or we want to move this one around too?
If we could please do number 1 first, we do have a guest here
All right.
to help with the first
Great.
one.
Is that somebody from Clackamas Federal Credit Union? All right, my credit union, thank you. All right, let's take number 1.
Good evening, Commissioners, City Manager. I'm very pleased to present this program to you. It's we call it the Entrepreneurial Opportunity Loan
You got to
Program.
get that mic closer to you.
Oh, sorry. There we go. We're very pleased to present this Entrepreneurial Opportunity Loan Program to you. And it's actually very unique in terms of the history of the city, because this is actually a public-private partnership of a special nature to help startups. And so we consider it a pilot program. So why now? During the pandemic, we lost a significant number of businesses. And we've a lot of studies, and we know just from experience that successful startup businesses grow when they're successful in their startups. They actually grow deeper roots in a community. So chances are they'll stay with us longer than a company that you would relocate to the community. But startups usually have deeper roots. The other thing, this is part of the strategic plan whereby we are fostering a diverse and resilient, vibrant local economy, and it contributes to that. We are very pleased to have with us one of our partners, proposed partners, the Clackamas Federal Credit Union. This credit union has been in existence since 1957, helping families and all over the county with their financial goals. And it is a not-for-profit financial cooperative dedicated to the financial success of its members. And so they provide a variety of products to their customers. And you will hear from Katie Gillespie, and we will introduce her in a few moments, and you will hear her comments regarding the program. The Micro Enterprise Services of Oregon, MESO, has been around since 2005. I actually serve on the board of directors for MESO, and they are an entrepreneurial development service. And they actually they do a lot of hand-holding for people who want to start a business, whether it's helping them with their business plan, helping them to understand how to operate the business, very fundamental things in some cases, and complicated assistance and high-level assistance in other cases. But they have been a successful growing entrepreneurial development program, and they will be opening up a series of branch offices across the region. And so we're very pleased that they have agreed to partner with us as well.
Well, as James mentioned, this is an innovative public-private partnership. And I want to tell you a little bit more about the role that the three partners will be playing, us in the Economic Development Department, the Clackamas Federal Credit Union, and MESO. Both the city and Clackamas Federal Credit Union are committing $50,000 to this loan fund. And the three organizations will also have a member serving on the loan committee, reviewing the applications and making recommendations for which loan application to approve. At the Economic Development Department, we'll be doing business referrals, recruiting folks, marketing the program, and talking to businesses that we think could use some startup assistance to see if they are a good match for this program. Clackamas Federal Credit Union will be providing loan program management, so they'll be the ones sending out reminders for when loan payments come due, those kinds of things. And MESO's role, as James was saying, is to provide technical assistance to businesses, so making sure that they're in the right place to take on a loan. Let's talk a little bit more about the program management. So the city will deposit the $50,000 into a non-interest-bearing account at Clackamas Federal Credit Union. At the end of the day, when the loans are paid back, the city's portion will be returned directly into the city. City, again, will be marketing the program, and Clackamas Federal Credit Union is playing a very important managerial role. We'll be using their loan documents and their loan management system. And again, the three members of the committee are Clackamas Federal Credit Union, Oregon City, and we're also going to be recruiting a local accountant to play a member of the loan committee.
The benefits.
She's with the Economic Development Department. You didn't say your name, and there may be people watching at home who have no idea who you are, even though we do know who you are. So.
Thank you, Commissioner McGriff.
Sorry about that, Ann. Benefits for entrepreneurial ventures. There are several. A lot of times when whether an individual or a business borrows money from a bank, the expectation is that the money is repaid almost immediately. A lot of businesses, particularly startups, need what we call patient capital. And that means that they give them a little time to use the money to help grow the business and to utilize as much of the money or the funding as much as possible to start that enterprise. So we're looking at the first loan repayment after 12 months, giving them a little time to use the money and grow the business. We're also offering through this program free technical assistance support the planning and the financial management that would come obviously through MESO. We primarily would like to focus on our target industries, which are in the strategic plan, but they include logistics, light manufacturing and assemblage, tourism, and the like. In terms of guidelines, the business has to be located in Oregon City. And startup means 0 to 3 years old. And that's the most vulnerable years for a lot of small businesses. We're looking at lending up to $20,000 for working capital, new machinery equipment, and renovations. Participants in the pool, this is not a first come, first served program because the resources are limited. We want to take a look at a pool of business deals and choose the best one, the one that's strongest, or the ones that are strongest, as opposed to first come, first serve. The term of the loan, we're looking at it at a 5-year term, and as I mentioned earlier, no principal repayments during the first 12 months. Because of the nature of the loan, we're looking at personal guarantees and or cosigner, one or the other or both, depending on the nature of the deal and the nature of the credit of that business or individual. Interest rate, during that 12-month period where there's no payment made, we're looking at charging 0.5 or 0.5% during the first year. And then after that, it's prime. It should be prime plus 3 percentage points afterwards. They must become a member of the credit union, as is the rule for most credit unions. Of all credit unions, you have to be a member of them. We're looking at the application period between August 15th to September 23rd to gather as many applicants or interested clients as possible.
Well, now it gives me pleasure to introduce our guest, Katie Gillespie, who is the Director of Business Lending at Clackamas Federal Credit Union. She has been at Clackamas Federal Credit Union for 21 years, and during that time, she's played many roles, but her passion has always been commercial lending. She started in the business lending department in 2010 and has helped to grow CFCU's business loan portfolio and has assisted many businesses in Oregon City to obtain financing. Katie lives in Oregon City with her husband of 17 years and their 2 children. She loves this area and playing an active part in our community. So we're grateful that you're here. Thank you.
Thank you, Ann. Yes, so I'm Katie Gillespie, been with the credit union for quite a while in business lending. Ann and James came to me, we met and discussed this program, and I immediately became very interested in what we do in business lending. There's not a lot of opportunities for capital for startups, and as James mentioned, it is difficult to get funds and to have time to grow your business in order to repay. So at Clackamas, as you said, you remember, one of our biggest missions is providing financial assistance, helping underserved, and we are very involved in our community. And so I think this program aligns a lot with our mission, so we're happy to support. And we absolutely have the processes in place to be able to service and assist with this program as well.
So with that said, we welcome your questions.
Gentlemen?
I'd like to let somebody else go first for a change.
Well, I submitted some questions ahead of time, so you have those. So if they don't want to start, you could answer my questions that I sent by email.
I didn't see those questions. Go ahead, answer.
Well, you were it was to you.
I didn't get the email for some reason. I don't know why.
Okay, I had asked a question. I had a question about how does the business qualify for that? So you kind of gave some general, our target industries, and unfortunately, I do not have the economic development plan on my person. I will make sure I bring it next time. So we talked about logistics, light manufacturing, tourism, and you said the like. I don't know exactly what, I don't remember what the like is.
Oh, no. Professional type businesses, technical professional businesses.
For example,
For instance, maybe an engineering company.
okay? So obviously I assumed, because I am a member of Clackamas Federal Credit Union, you had to be a member, because I know that I've been on a credit union board before, not this one, but a different one. So I know you have to be a member before you can access any funds. So obviously that's great. So what is it that we consider, I say we, generally not me, what do we consider a personal guarantee?
A personal guarantee is whereby you actually secure the personal assets of an individual seeking a loan. It's sort of like a general, so it's a general guarantee where all the assets.
So it might be a lien.
It might be a lien,
Okay.
but no, actually it's a guarantee. It's a blanket guarantee. So so that's what it does. So,
Let's see what I write here in the margin. I'm assuming, I wrote down, here's what I write here. I wrote, what are some of the substantial requirements that somebody would have to meet to qualify for something like this? And then the other question I have is, are we looking to try to, we haven't started it yet, but obviously MWASB is very important to me. So that would be minority, women-owned, emerging small businesses. So I'm assuming when we're talking entrepreneurs, we're talking about some emerging small businesses, which I think would be completely appropriate. The other thing I have here is that MESO doesn't work for free. So are we helping to pay MESO to do some of this work so that they can continue their operations?
to answer the last question, I'll go backwards.
Okay.
MESO will be working for free. They receive a lot of grant funding from a variety of sources, and this fits their mission, and they were very pleased to know that Oregon City is going to be doing this. They want to do more of this type of activity in Oregon City. So they were very pleased that we asked them to be a partner, so it is free of charge. Now, in terms of eligibility, what we would look at, when someone seeks to start a business, you want to make sure that they at least have some experience in running, whether or not their own business or running someone else's business. Sometimes even those individuals who have failed at business have learned something about running a business. So you don't always have to be, a millionaire and successful. You can learn from your failures too. And that's an important experience. Also, we look at the collateral. The personal guarantees. What do you have to offer for the loan? And then, of course, the product itself. Is the product or the service marketable? What is your marketing plan? What makes you think that this will do well? And so there's a series of questions, a series of things. And, of course, we'll look at your projections, your financial projections. Now, of course, they're only projections. However, a great deal of anyone who produces projections should have put a great deal of thought in what they're doing in terms of projections. And so therefore, we look at how they're thinking as relates to how they intend to run the business and secure profit.
So hopefully they'll have a basic business plan?
Yes.
That should be in this report.
Yes.
All of those things and more. There's not enough here for us to really comprehend the way that this is going to be administered, the guidelines that we're looking for, the reason that we're focusing on individual sectors. All that needs to be explained, and there's just not enough here. And I guess my main concern is that on this item and one other, it says information only. Are none of these going to come to us for approval?
Because this is a workshop, as you know.
No, I know, but it's not, it says on there very specifically, information only. Most reports say it's coming back to us on a designated date. These do not.
This will be coming back on June 15th.
Okay.
Thank you. So about the loan review committee, so there's an accountant, a local accountant, there is someone from the city and there is someone from the credit union. Does MESO not have a member on the committee?
It would not be appropriate for MESO to be on the committee because they're providing technical assistance to the client, so there'd be a conflict.
Right.
Maybe from one.
And then would each of the entities that I just listed, would they have one representative? Like, how large is this committee and how many reps from each of those entities, the city?
23.
23.
No, 3.
Oh, 3.
23, holy cow, that's going to be quite a committee.
Okay, so it's just one from each.
Right.
Okay. And then I'm assuming that this particular loan program might exclude those in the childcare industry, given what we're about to discuss next with those loans that we may or may not be looking at.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Well, my fellow commissioners have gotten a lot of questions answered for me. I agree with Commissioner Smith. I would have liked to have seen these answers. You know, my questions have previously been answered as to applicant criteria. How is the money dispersed? Is it dispersed in a lump sum or is it a series of payments?
It will be dispersed in one lump sum to the borrower.
Okay, and I talked about default solutions and criteria. You talked about security for the loan. Because we've had some real failures and we've managed to lose some serious money in supporting businesses without those things in place. And it's also important to vet the applicant. You know, we've seen the difference between having an unqualified applicant try to run a business versus turning it over to somebody that knows that line of business. For example, a restaurant. You know, if you're not previously a restaurateur, maybe that's not your business. So we're putting a lot of weight on this small board of 3 people that's going to decide this. The selection of businesses, you know, what I would have liked to have seen criteria. Are we looking for longevity? Are we looking for growth opportunities? Are we looking to fill some things that don't currently exist in Oregon City? The tech assistance, you just answered where that was going to come from. I was curious, but you said it comes from that other organization. I don't know that we've actually targeted an industry. It seems like, well, let's see what comes our way and then we'll decide. I mean, I don't hear that we specifically targeted a specific industry. The application period is fairly short, 5 weeks coming up. It'll be there and it'll be gone. It sounds like administering it will fall to the credit union itself. You know, I would have liked to have seen, and I hope that that the application states desirable qualifications and default remedies, and because what I worry about is just putting out money. Like I just saw a report from Portland, they've lost $875,000 on poorly administered homeless housing programs. I mean, it's easy to not control money. So, you know, I agree with Commissioner Smith. I would have liked to have seen all that. Is there an application form that currently exists?
Yes, as a matter of fact, we'll be using the credit union's application form as Anthony mentioned, as well as their systems. So we didn't want to create a whole system ourselves. There's one existing with the credit union. So we would use their forms as well as their loan program, their management system. And
for example, having attached that form would have had value.
That needs to be in your report.
You know, that say, okay, this is.
Or a draft, draft of something,
I think that's in the memorandum of understanding attached, but.
There was no application attached.
Oh, no, not an application, no. We will be using the credit union's
We want to see it in report.
But I think that the important thing to keep in mind that the credit union, of course, the accountant and your staff are experienced in making loans. We've done it lots of times. And sometimes when you put together programs like this, there has to be some flexibility, and sometimes things don't come out. You don't provide all the paperwork and all the systems that you're asking for, because you're developing it in a creative way, in a creative fashion. But nevertheless, we've answered your questions. We certainly can add more information in the documents, certainly by the June 15th date that we're coming forward with. But we're just so appreciative of the credit union for stepping forward and being a willing partner as well as MESO. So it's important that we work together to make this happen.
Well, remember, when you come before this commission of making an ask for money, these are the people that are responsible for the success of those programs. So they're going to ask questions.
That's fine, that's fine.
And we did. And I'm confident in the credit union loaning officer who does business loans, because I've been in those situations and I know that they dig pretty deep to ensure that they're making a good loan that they don't have to put in default. So in effect, they're protecting their $50,000 that they're putting into the pot, and they got to protect the 50 that we put into the pot. I think when it comes back before us, attach that application so everybody's comfortable with qualifying the applicant, and maybe the business itself. You know, what's needed versus what's not. What has a chance to succeed versus what has extensive competition already in the area. I'm not saying that would exclude them, but it puts you in a different position where you're filling a need versus entering a saturated market. So in the end, there's 3 people going to sit up there, and we're only one of those. And it's, I mean, once I see the application, I'll feel more comfortable with it, and I think that would have been helpful tonight. But I think we can get through it in a meeting with that addition.
What I want to say to the public that's watching and to our staff is that you are looking at 4 of the biggest advocates in this town. We get stopped or talked to by people all the time. So the more that we know, not the details, super details, but we can say, by the way, do you know that we have this loan program? Here's some basic information. Here's who you need to contact. We need to have enough information so that when we're out talking to the public or we get asked about it, we have enough specificity that we can answer some questions. We're not going to try to help them approve it, anything. But you know the type of questions we get asked all the time. It's people who are watching this meeting or will watch it later because they say, hey, I heard you had the information that we are asking for here is probably some of the same information they may have. They may not call you immediately. They may watch the commission meeting. Hopefully they'll watch the commission meeting on the 15th and they'll get some idea of how this may apply to them, or maybe it doesn't apply to them at all. So we're not asking for information solely for ourselves, but that's 90% of it. But we are asking because we know we have an audience out there. I mean, I'm always amazed when people tell me, oh, I watched the commission meeting, and I go, you did? You know, I know that sounds surprising, but.
But you know, when programs like this are put together, there are always brochures.
Not always, but.
No, but this one will have one.
Yes.
I'm not accustomed to not having a program without
Well, then you make sure you get us some brochures, because I carry around stuff in my car, and I can say, oh, wait a minute, I can go to my car and give you a brochure,
But
you know, whatever.
There are brochures to explain the program to anyone who wants to apply. And of course, the credit union has been in business since, 1957? So I'm sure their application is pretty good.
Yeah.
And so I would say that I would not put the program off because you haven't seen an application from a company.
We're not saying that.
Well, let me finish. Who's been in business since 1957. They have an application process. They're very experienced at what they do. The other 2 entities are very experienced at what they do. The number of people on the committee doesn't guarantee anything. Just as long as you have the expertise on the committee, they can make the decision. More paper is not going to guarantee a successful business. It's the minds of those people on the committee that makes the difference.
And I think what we're saying is we don't want to make it up as we go along.
We get it.
So I get it. I'm confident in a loan officer and their processes. But again, this is the decision-making body who has fiscal responsibility to the city, and they have the right to ask for anything they want to ask for. And it's a simple request.
I'm obviously very supportive of this type of a program and others that may come forward as I was when we did the COVID relief funds. I continue to hear positive things about that and how it really helped businesses. And so those types of things, for me, as a resident here, a person who believes a lot very strongly in buy local, I want to be able to put this information back out to people and say, this is what we are doing in Oregon City to help you. We're not going to hit everybody, but we're going to hopefully put our fishing rod into the pond, and we will pull out some fish to assist and help people get to where they need to be. I think an accountant, yeah, that's a good one. But the other thing I thought about in terms of possibly adding to the group would be somebody who is, I know the credit union is, but, you know, they do a variety of loans, somebody that might specialize in or have some expertise in small business lending for POCs, because I'm hoping some of those folks will apply. We also want to look at maybe somebody from another lending institution. I don't know. I mean, they're spread pretty thin these days. I know my bank is, as well as the credit union, and so they may not be available, but it might be something to look at.
Well, that one would be a concern to the credit union because they would not want another.
Proprietary. Well, somebody with some experience, maybe it's not in our region, maybe it's somebody else that doesn't know a lot about, but, 3 people's a pretty small group. So we will look forward to seeing this again on the 15th. Thank you. We thank the credit union and thank the board of directors for the support of this. This is really important. I'm glad to see that we are partnering with our local folks, and, thank you again. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Appreciate your time.
And if I see you at the credit union, I will definitely say hello. I was just there yesterday.
Wonderful. Thank you.
All right, are we switching seats?
Yep, we're going to do a musical chairs.
All right. Well, you're not moving. All right, back to one of our most favorite topics,
Yes, the
special events program.
special event.
Who's got the clicker?
I got the clicker. Let's go through the program. So the objectives are the same from the last time. We want to be accountable to taxpayers. We want to support the sustainability of any special event, really. We want whatever special events that are sponsored by the city should connect to the economy. And to help it just doesn't stand alone. And it should be a signature special public event, something that's special and important, and hopefully we'll put our city on the map going forward. And a degree of transparency is important. In terms of definition, as I said, it should be a signature event. It supports our tourism industry. It supports the tourism brand. It attracts many tourists and city residents, and it contributes to the hometown feel as well as the community's unique identity. However, overall, the city will provide for the use of certain city-owned assets and city services that it has access to and the capability of providing. So that's what we're looking at. In terms of types of city-sponsored events, I'll let Dan take over from there.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Daniel Gearing. I'm the Tourism Project Specialist, and my job is all about tourism. And as we all know, special events are an important part of bringing visitors to the community, as well as entertaining our own citizens. We are going to be focusing on 2 types of events in this program. The first one is the city region special events. These are the smaller activities. There will have a smaller amount of available funds available. And then there's also the city marquee events. These are our big placemaker events that really stand out in the community and as well as the state. We're going to be marketing to a mega region, as well as the funds are going to be a little bit more significant as part of that program. That mega region is actually on the map that you see in front of you. Many of you have probably seen this before. This is the Nielsen designated marketing area map. This is for anything like we do with television, like KATU. This is the region that they feel are marketed to. This region is also an important element to keep in mind as we have moved into an economy that does not actually support a lot of travel at this time. And so even though that regional map is much, I'm sorry, I pushed the button a little too soon. That regional map is very large. I actually am surprised at how far down in the central Oregon state it goes, but that region is probably not as much of our target market as much as the Multnomah, Washington County, the Lane counties that were much shorter trips, but where they are going to come and spend the day. That region covers almost, it's 2.6 million people in that community that are 18 and over. Adults from 25 to 45 are 1.3 million. And so that is reaching quite a lot of people. And so that would be that both these smaller events as well as the marquee events will be able to take advantage of both of these target areas.
In terms of eligibility, those projects or special events, of course, would be in our public right-of-ways and in our city parks and other city-owned facilities. Those are the venues that are eligible for the program. Of course, we would look forward. It's important that the applicant is in good standing with federal, state, and local regulatory organizations. Also, in terms of eligibility, there would be a need for many special events, a traffic control plan. And Public Works provides that type of analysis and permit all the time. And so any costs that are incurred for that permit, the program would certainly pay for. Security plan, if there is a need for public police presence, that's also an element that we would look at in compensating to the department. City sponsorship assets would certainly also include traffic control barriers and street closures. City police, once again, and Public Works personnel presence, certainly in the area of crowd and traffic control. We're looking at when it comes to parks, we're looking basically at the rentals, whether you're renting the entire park or renting a part of it or a asset of it. We're looking at certainly contributing to to support that as well. We have a robust marketing program and partnership, and we would use that partnership with those city-sponsored events. So we would be paying for those resources as well.
You want a question now, or because it was on the previous page?
What?
She has a question.
Yes, you have a
We're
question?
going to go through it page by page.
Well, I just had a question about the city assets and elements. Are some of those going to be in kind?
No, this is strictly payment payment to the departments for assets used. For instance, if the cost of the permit, we'd pay for the cost of the permit. If there's a cost.
And where does that cost go?
Where does it go?
So I get a permit, it's $5. Where does my $5 go?
It depends on who's issuing the permit. So if it's Public Works issuing the permit, it goes to Public Works. If it's Parks and Rec issuing a permit, it goes to Parks and Rec.
Okay. Well, that's something we need to consider because there are events that, as you are well aware, that have been put on over the years that are directly benefiting Oregon City. So I'll leave it at that.
Okay. Criteria, it's important that these special events, a lot of times people say that, well, we had 6,000, 8,000, whatever number of attendees. Well, we need to know how you're using, what you're using to substantiate those numbers. The applicant must have existing insurance coverage, commercial liability coverage. In order to spread the wealth, it's important that the sponsor of the special event or city support or city-sponsored event have multiple vendors involved, so that it just doesn't simply benefit one vendor, but a number of vendors who are participating in the event. The event should serve everyone and anyone who's a part, who wants to attend the events. We want to create an environment that visitors will likely spend money also at local businesses, not at the event itself, but also they're encouraged to spend money with our local businesses. The special event should support the tourism brand, and that's an important element here. The producer and the organizer, sometimes partnerships are the best. Sometimes a partner, I mean, we're not requiring partnerships, but sometimes partnering with someone who's with people who are putting on a special event, you could actually reduce some of the risk involved in putting on special events. And when that occurs, we certainly wouldn't frown upon that. We support that. And of course, annual application to the program would be required. The committee, there's a committee on city-sponsored special events, and they would include the ones that you see here, the Chamber of Commerce, Oregon City Police, where it's asterisks there. So if personnel or facilities are involved with that event, we certainly call on the city police to be a part of that committee. The Oregon City Parks and Recreation, the same thing. If they're a part of the process, we'd like them to be involved in the committee. Oregon City Code Enforcement and Oregon City Public Works in Mount Hood Territory, all are asked to be a part of this city-sponsored event. And also, it gives an opportunity for all these departments to take a look at an event and to chime in and to sort of to certainly help the producer of the special event, and chances are either in one room or a Zoom call, but it's important that people get together to look at the event and work with the producers to make it a success. Daniel?
So the process is going to be basically that once the application is filled out, that there'll be a 30-day review period, allowing all the departments to review the application, any of the participants that need to find out if there's any additional questions, and that would give everyone a chance to provide the feedback, and then provide the feedback in one piece to the actual special event person. So instead of getting them coming from all different directions, once they have actually been approved, they'll get a fully executed city sponsorship agreement that will be made. They will need to provide their proof of commercial liability insurance, and if there's needed, a traffic control plan would need to be finalized and submitted to that committee.
So as we go,
And we get. You've got up to 30 days to review by approve.
That's the recommendation, it's 30 days. It could happen anytime between the beginning of that 30 days to the end of that 30 days.
okay. So so for FY 2023, we're suggesting that the next year, the application period is from February 1st to March 31st, because a lot of people are doing their budgets during that period of time. And to be able to get their applications in while they're doing that gives ample time to go through the program. The Committee on Sponsored Events would review a fully completed application, and once again, as he said, we would take about up to 30 days to review the application and approve the application from the project, from the producer. So within that 30 days, we'll review the application. We will work with those producers to get them the necessary permits, because all the departments will be in one place, and they'll be able to as a consequence of the committee, and they will be able to chime in and help the producers of the event with their permits, and as well as provide some technical assistance and advice. And then there's a certificate of approval. As Daniel mentioned, you would get a certificate of approval once we have a signed agreement, the commercial liability and traffic control plan. So
that time period seems awfully short to me, but I don't know what you guys think about that. That doesn't seem like very time.
Are you talking about the grant application period? Okay, thank you.
And then who, are you going to be, are you the one that's sitting on the committee?
I don't think so. I'm going to be intaking the application, and that's about it.
Hey, to spare like as much time as possible, because I'm going to be on this for a long time.
Okay, well, you're not going to be on it for a long time, because we have one other thing to do, so we do have some time limits.
We have had this, we had this as a topic in April.
Yes.
Okay, I warned you, and as the commission, as the city staff, the amount of time that this would take to go through. And I pleaded with you to find a different process to deal with the summer events, which this commission did not do.
I asked.
Actually,
Here
if you
we
look at
are
the screen,
in
Commissioner.
on June 7th. We still haven't got it figured out, and I have an hour of questions that I didn't get answered at previous meetings, and I want to go through it today. And if we've listened to this full presentation multiple times and have not gotten to go through our questions, this will not pass next week unless I, convey my expression of what, so it can either happen at this meeting
Okay,
or
well, let's see where
June
we are at
15th.
8:30,
But we
okay?
know what's going to happen in June 15th. We're going to be cut for time.
Okay, well, then let's see.
So I
what we
want
get
to
done at
let staff
8:30.
finish their presentation, but then I want to go through my notes.
Did you submit any of these ahead of time, these questions?
Absolutely not, and nor did I see this presentation in slide form before this meeting tonight,
Just asking.
because there's a bunch of new information in this that we have not seen yet today, till today.
the application process overview for 2022, we obviously wanted to get started with this. So for those projects that are being put together or haven't occurred, we're recommending that you can complete an application by June 30th. If you complete an application by June 30th, and it's on a first-come, first-served basis, and the event is currently underway in terms of planning, and it hasn't occurred yet, we would look at reimbursing that organization for some of those expenses that they've incurred while they're planning. Now, as I said, they need to get their application in by June 30th. Next slide, please.
So starting on June 24th, as I mentioned just a few minutes ago, we will actually be putting together a program where the application is going to be online, allowing them to fill out. We've been working diligently with the different departments to help consolidate the application questions all together. We're still in that first phase of getting the form finalized. And then once we have that, we will be presenting that before the rest of the department heads to make sure that they have that. The application will be for all city events. I will be intaking those at that stage, making sure that they're complete. And then once that application has been verified that it's complete, the system will automatically, once I check it off as being approved, will then send the application to each of the departments. Each department will then have the ability to then review that and make any recommendations, questions that they may have, which will then trigger a call with the program that is the event program.
Is there a fast-track procedure in here? I mean, you know which event I'm talking about. It's already been advertised, so.
Right, and again, as we mentioned in the previous
Yes.
slide, we really are focusing on that this is from that June, we understand that there is a really limited window. We will have them fill out the application, and then they will be reimbursed for those expenses that meet the qualification of the event. They'll be reimbursed for those funds.
Perfect.
And that's only for the 2022 season. 2023 will then go through the regular application process.
Okay, the next form, the input.
So we did reach out, as Commissioner McGriff asked, we reached out to 3 of our partners that are focused on events. We were able to get.
Who are?
That was DOCA. So Liz Hannum from DOCA, Linda Orzen from a variety of events that she does, and Bryce from OC Brewing for the OC Brew Fest. We had them re-look at the application, and as you can see, there were 4 main key takeaways from that. I could kind of let you guys have a chance to read those real quick to see what those takeaways were. So, with that said,
The last one is probably the key.
Agreed.
with that said, our presentation's done, and we can answer any questions.
Of the process and length of the process, resolving that is probably of interest to everyone.
I'm sorry, say the beginning part again.
The last bullet point there, the program could help resolve the complicated process for events. That's of special interest to us.
Sure.
Yeah.
Because I got a complaint from somebody, all they wanted to do was park their vehicles while they loaded their bus, and they wanted to do it at the end of the Oregon Trail. Gail sent them to the Parks Department and received a 9-page application for the 30-day waiting period, this person had everything in place, including insurance. Their intent was to familiarize people with an offering, the end of the Oregon Trail. This was so lengthy and not knowing when they were going to get approval, they moved their pickup point to another location, and we lost an opportunity for exposure. 9 pages to park, to pick up people and put them on your bus and leave. That seems, and 30 days, that seems ludicrous. That's not making it easy to do business with us.
One of the things as we started this process was it did really start to realize as we were putting this application and even just trying to put that together, we were able to, actually James took each of those applications and he's like, oh, look, they're asking for the exact same things, but we were asking them to fill that application out 3 separate times, one for parks, one for planning, one for, the police department actually didn't have an application, so but we had all these pieces together. So by bringing them into one centralized application and then working with communication for all the departments was going to be super important, so that, for example, if we had an event that the police would have had some interest in, or at least know that it is happening at Clackamas Park, they would be communicated to. Sometimes they don't get communicated to, or like, for example, tourism. We don't know that there's an event already in the planning stage until this communication started, and we were able to communicate all of that among each other.
Is it still 9 pages?
It is, but I will tell you that it's the fastest 9 pages you can get because it's usually about 4 questions per page.
And one other point, keep in mind that all the departments have come together and have done some brainstorming and agreed that our goal is to have one form for all special events. Each department is in the room to review the application, and if everyone is in the room at the same time, it eliminates people going from one building to the next, so that people will have an opportunity to be in one location. So it helps with the logistics, and I think that's important. That way, you're not running from one building to the next, and eventually we like to move toward one invoicing system, and so that there's one bill, it's itemized, but it's going to take a little while to get there. But this first stage is important. One application for all projects, for all special events, and all the departments in the same room reviewing the applications.
Don't you have the person who deals with all things financial sitting in the back of the room?
And he's actually been involved in these planning meetings, and this is a really important part because we do have different systems working in different departments, and being able to, in the future, come up with a system that is centralized would be a huge step forward for Matt's team as well as our team, as well as trying to apply this program.
Again, I would be interested in seeing the draft of the application that you have so far.
And according to my complainant, the simple task of parking 40 vehicles and transferring them to a bus qualified as a special event, and they had to fill out this 9 pages. So, and the other thing I'll say is, the police get notified on every event. There's an asterisk next to their name that says if involved. They're always involved. So don't tell me that they may or may not get involved, or may or may not get notified. They get involved on every application. I saw an asterisk that said if involved, no.
All right.
I know Commissioner Smith is chomping at the bit, so.
Okay, so let's take a deep breath and start with your first question.
Okay, here's a couple things, first of all, before I start. I could have told you all of that. I could have told you it was complicated. I could have told you how much it was complicated. That's my whole point here. And so I'm going to go through every detail of every question because it needs to happen. Because this opens the can of worms that is so huge. And being someone that has planned hundreds of events in this town at every possible level, has been a vendor at hundreds of events, probably 6 a year, from small to large, knows every aspect of planning an event in this town and other cities. I'm going to tell you why it's so complicated. And the problem is it's not just an economic development thing, it's a parks thing, and all these other departments, and I don't think we're going to be able to figure it out in another full year. And that's why I'm super concerned, because I don't want to go into this halfway, because it is going to create so many issues that you probably in your department don't see yet, and I'm going to go through a couple of them. But second of all, to be rushed through meetings where we don't get the opportunity to ask the questions puts us in this situation. And then I'm asked to read brand new slides from a presentation that I didn't get until tonight. So I don't need to listen to a presentation over again when I've been sitting for a month with these questions. And I'm going to go through them, and it's going to be a long time. And if you feel like cutting me off, I would recommend not.
Well, you've got 45 minutes now. So we'll see where we are in 45 minutes.
I'm going to start on page 1 of the staff report. Page 1 of the staff report refers to the different titles for what is a signature event, special public event, etc. Now, Parks Department came to us with a general report in April, at the same time that this report was brought to us. These are intertwined, these two issues. All right? Parks Department came to us with a report on April 12th that was regarding special event process revisions. Now, in that report, they talked about certain things that they thought they were reporting back to the commission. Things like, oh, it's difficult to rent a park, it's difficult to do this, and they did a report on that. But that request was so much more than that. If you go back to the previous meeting on that topic, it was under Mayor Holliday before they had come to us again, where we asked detailed questions about parks usage, the process, down to all the details that were wanted to be answered by that previous commission. Those questions were never answered by the Parks Department. Instead, and that's partly because the staff, by the time that agenda item came back to us, and by the way, I have been interviewed by the Parks Department at least multiple times on this same topic, or hours at a time. None of those people work here anymore. That's how long it's taken. And so now we have all these people that are here now trying to deal with the same thing. And they're still not grasping it. On that report that Parks brought to us on April 12th, they said this: And by the way, they didn't address most of the issues that were previously asked by this commission, but they tried to come up with a way to simplify the process of just renting parks, separate from special events or signature events. And this is what they came to us with on April 12th. They said, some areas for improvement included deciding on one definition of a special event. The team's work included renaming the process from special event to park rental to eliminate definition confusion. I asked it on that night because on April 12th, every reference was to special events, in which we were told we were changing it to just plain old park use, park rental. Here's the amount of definitions just in this one report. Just in this one 3-page report that refers to special events. City-sponsored public events, signature public special events, city-sponsored special public events, city region special public events, city marquee events, special public events. Those are all listed in just this one report. It's super confusing. All right, so that's one question. Is the Parks Department using the same terms that we are in economic development? And if I read this report, and some of the little bits here imply that now all park rentals are going to go through tourism? Because what you just said tonight was city-owned facilities, park assets, sections of parks and their assets. So that implies my question in the last meeting, which was also, when is the building use going to come to us? Because this is not just tourism, this is parks use, it's park rentals, and it's building use. This is citywide, because you can't do one in each column. They all intermix. And so I'll go to the next page. I'll just, because that's not a direct question. I'm just trying to lay out to you how detailed this is. All right. On page 3 of the report, it refers to organizations, businesses, or individuals. This is important to me because at one time, to rent a city park, there was a different tier for nonprofits. I believe that disappeared the 2 years I was off this commission because I don't know how that happened. But we were told for some reason there's now no tier for nonprofits versus businesses. Well, I'm sorry, if a city has a city-sponsored signature event that is for a profit, that's interesting. And if it doesn't acknowledge nonprofit events with some sort of recognition, that doesn't make sense to me at all. This also refers to existing, to an event, whether you're a nonprofit, business, or individual, you have to have existing commercial liability insurance. Most nonprofits don't have that. They have event insurance. So I'm not sure what the stipulation is between the two, but most organizations would have specific event insurance for a specific event, not commercial liability insurance. So that's something I'm questioning. A committee of all departments impacted will be established to review and approve all applications for the sponsorship. It includes all of these different things. Yes, I understand in terms of logistics and other issues, all of these people might be involved. But is this the committee that's responsible for making a decision whether or not a signature event fits the guidelines and is a tourism asset? I don't think so. That's two different things. The police department, public works, and all those are going to look into the things about how the event works, not the other piece of whether it brings people to this town, whether it's the best event to get the grant money, any of that stuff. Those are two completely different things. Clearly, not all of those people would be involved if they're not, which means that that committee changes structure for every single event. And so if they are actually making the determination of whether the event gets a grant, it's not consistent. I understand that committee doing the logistics and signing off on those kind of things, but not in terms of the funding. So right now, looking at this, we don't know how that process works. We don't have the application. We don't know what that looks like. and I'm not going to approve this until I know exactly what that application says, because that application is going to be missing a lot. Once the application is filled out, how exactly does that process go into play? From the minute that application gets in, are all those department heads contacted? And I think was told to us in the last presentation, within a week they were all going to meet. I cannot imagine, and I will give you big kudos if you can figure out a process in this town where an application comes in and all these department heads meet within a week. I will be, praising you extensively, because I think that's going to be extremely hard to do.
Seems like that's an awful lot of a burden on all the departments.
It's a lot, because we don't know how many applications this things, and this document says all events in this town, not just the ones that are signature events. Okay, so special public events, no matter the event, and no matter where it takes place. That means if you have an event at the library park, that goes through tourism. If it happens at the Pioneer Center or the Ermatinger House, does that go through the tourism? I mean, I want you to understand how big of a statement that is. And that's why I asked about park use and building use. Okay?
Economic development or tourism is just simply a portal for one application.
I understand that.
Okay.
But do you understand how many events that is?
Yes, we do understand how many, but once again, it's only a portal. We're not making decisions on the application. We're simply collecting information and helping the applicant get that information, and then distributing it to the various departments. All of this is in the cloud.
So is tourism is economic development or tourism is just the pass-through, so it doesn't have any say in usage fees or input on that?
No,
So can you tell me that that's not happening right now for individual events where tourism is giving input on fees?
tourism is not giving input on fees. We're simply collecting the application. I mean, in terms of this proposal, we're simply collecting the application. The fees for many of these departments have been settled through resolution.
I'll leave that specific question with the commission for a future email that I might share with you. One application, okay, so building use is the question, that's mostly for parks. I hope that comes back to us as well, because that is going to be a huge, so basically the reason I'm asking about building use is the way that this is worded. If an event happens at the Ermatinger House or the library, it's going through economic development. That's what this says.
Yeah, it's the application. It's the application's a portal.
All right.
It is, though.
It is. You
Well,
just said
according
it
to
was.
that. So we're having an event next Sunday, and I don't think it's going through
No,
economic
because
development.
there's no process set up for this yet. That's my point. All right, next thing. Event organizers meet with all the pertinent departments at one time. How is that coordinated? Who's coordinating all that?
Economic development, tourism.
All right, when's the application going to be done?
So we just had the final feedback from the, I guess you would call the sub-departments. So like, for example, Aaron Parker gave us feedback from the public works side. We got from the Parks and Rec side. So I'm still applying all of those changes to it. And then we have a meeting on the 14th scheduled with the department heads to go over it for the first time. They haven't seen it either because we're just in this development phase.
And then it's going to come to us the next day?
I wouldn't know, I'm sorry.
Well, that's when this is coming to us, on the 15th.
We're going to be out of town.
The application is practically, actually, the application itself is practically finished. We want to make sure that the
Then why
departments have,
wasn't it in this report?
it's, as I said, practically finished. We want to make sure that the other departments have time to review.
Okay, so it will be here, we'll have that for the 15th.
You'll have it by the 15th, but, yeah.
Okay, how is an event going to know when they fill out an application whether or not they're going to meet the threshold of 800 people? And what if they don't? that be dealt with? How will that be tracked? How is the grant money that we have here? So we have this threshold for the first level is that events can get between 3,000 and 5,000. How did we come up with that number? Is that just a random number? Or did we actually look at what events of that type would cost in terms of barricades city uses to come up with some rationale for that number? Because my worry is you don't know how much it costs to plan some of these events. And they might get a $3,000 grant from the city, but that won't even cover a third of the expenses that the city's going to ask them for fees.
We only have a total of $100,000 for.
I understand that.
So therefore, the resources are not going to go that far.
I understand that. And I want to put this in comparison that we are going to plan an event in Oregon City for the bridge anniversary, which is going to probably draw less than 800 people, and we're going to spend $50,000 possibly on it.
But not all of that money is coming from that pot of money.
I just want to put this in comparison of if this grant process is truly to subsidize events and keep them afloat, we need to know that that $3,000 to $5,000 is going to be enough to do that. Because if it's not, those events still won't happen. And if that money figure is not relative to actual uses of city materials, then it's just a random number that you came up with. I want to know how that number was come up with. I don't need to answer it now. I'll just ask my questions and they can come back. So same for the second level events. And who decides the amount? Because that amount's not going to equal the fees that the city is going to owe. So eventually, someone's going to make a dollar amount decision, and how does that relate? And then if you have multiple departments, say the police department says for this event, it's going to cost the reserve officers this amount of money. Public Works says for barricades, it's going to cost this amount of money. Parks says to rent the park, it's going to cost this amount of money, and that equals $10,000. Then who in the city decides which departments get funded with that grant and which ones that group has to pay for? Because those departments are going to be fighting over that and figuring out how that works. I don't know how that works. And I don't think you know how that works yet. Because each of those department heads are going to decide whether their amount gets funded or not. Or is that going to be at the tourism level? Okay? To abstain city sponsorships is necessary for the applicant to be in good legal standing with local, state, federal. Who's going to check that? Are you going to do all that? It means, are their finances, do they have, if they're a nonprofit organization, are they filed with the state? Do they have all these things? I mean, who's going to look at that? That's another thing that we're going to have economic development do. I mean, this sounds like a lot. The outcome, that was...
You're in the guidelines, correct?
Yeah, that's on... eligible applicants on these pages aren't even numbered.
Yeah, I see. Eligible applicants. Yeah.
All right. Application period. In order to apply, so the people question the 30 days. 30 days to kind of finalize things makes sense here, except for a couple of things. You're saying they have to apply 30 days ahead of their event, right, for it to be looked at, right?
No, we're just saying that the application, they put a complete application when it's submitted. The city gets 30 days to review and work with the applicant in making sure the application is.
The timeline that worries me is this: they can't apply for this until they do a whole list of things, and the list of things is. I believe, don't they have to get all these permits, right, before they fill out this application, correct?
There are external permits that they.
I'm not talking about that. Well, I'm talking about that sort of, but.
There are external permits, like permits that are controlled by the county or the liquor.
Can you tell me what permits are controlled by the county other than food handling for an event?
Well, that's one of those.
Well, other than that,
I think you said food, right? So that's the only one that I believe the county is responsible for, but you have the Liquor Control Board too, and you have, if they're serving liquor at the event. So there's a number of external.
okay, so your list is Clackamas County. I would assume they have nothing for event permits with it in a city. OLCC, yes, if you're doing alcohol at an event, that would happen.
Sure.
Clackamas Fire Department, they wouldn't be doing anything other than fireworks or fire extinguishers in vendors. Now, here's where this is a real big question, because I think already one of the events in motion was concerned about the fact that they had to make sure vendors had individual permits. I have never planned an event where the event coordinator was responsible for obtaining business license for every single vendor, nor have I ever been a part of an event where an event promoter has been responsible for obtaining the health permits. Those are what vendors do. So in order for an event producer to produce an event, by the way, most event producers wouldn't know who their vendors are 30 days ahead of time. So asking the event creator to provide business license of every single vendor before an application goes in is impossible.
Well, but when you put together an when you are a producer of an event, chances are you are organizing your event before you even put in the application. So therefore, when you put in the application, you pretty much have an idea of what you're going to do. You don't have to.
Sure, you would have an idea of how many vendors, but are you asking for business license for vendors before this application is filled out?
That's another item we're looking at, actually, quite frankly, because.
No, I want an answer to that question. Are we asking, in order for an event to be a signature event and fill out a form, do they have to have all those boxes checked off?
Not all of these boxes, because all of these boxes don't apply to them. Like, for instance, if you're not selling
James,
liquor.
I mean the ones that do. Do they have to all be checked off before they sign that agreement?
If they need a business, if it's required of them to have a business license, they need to have a business license.
I'm asking you if it's required.
It's required as it stands now.
Well, the timing of it is what you're asking.
Why is it the responsibility of the person putting on the event to make sure all their vendors have business?
So
That's not their responsibility.
right.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah, so that's a no then.
That's a no, yes.
Okay.
I understand what you're saying
Yeah.
now.
But the timing.
But I don't think that was the case a few weeks ago when downtown went through this process, because that was a thing that came up. Here's what I want you to just understand the details of this, right? Now, I get that we want businesses that operate in Oregon City to have a business license. I get that. And in fact, I also get that that is something we might want to consider for special events, especially if we have businesses coming in for special events that are not from Oregon City. That's why most events say, like Comic-Con in City of Portland, if I rent a booth at Comic-Con at City of Portland, the event promoters say, in order to be a vendor, you need to obtain this permit. They do.
The vendor.
Does Comic-Con check it? No, but the vendor is responsible for getting it. The same way a food vendor would be responsible for getting their their service. That's not something that's part of this process. Okay? That is done, you could say the event promoter should expect these things of their vendors, but you can't expect that from the event promoter to provide those, especially not in time 30 days before an event or in time to go through this process. It's just not possible. I think I'm going to stop there, but what I really want to get through, and the thing that this is so important in my mind is I have people calling me every day on this that are planning events right now and are going through this process that are not enjoying it. I also have a lot of people asking me in different friends groups and organizations in this city, what the heck is the process? If they want to rent a park, if they want to rent a building, And guess what? They're getting answers that are different from every department. And that's happening this week. I've heard that. So what I'm trying to convey to you is the building use thing, I don't care if it's park renting out, and I understand how complicated it is, and that's why we have to figure this out. If someone wanted to do an event at the Ermatinger House, that's a park. So that's a park use, but it also could be a building use. If someone rents the library, I assume you would go to the library director, but in reality, if it's an event on that property, it's a city park. So who do they go to? If it's at the Pioneer Center, who do they go to? If I rent the Pioneer Center, is that going to be the same process at the end of the Oregon Trail? And is that going to be the same process at the Ermatinger House? And I'm telling you, it is not right now, at all. And so if we don't fix all of those things, and that's why I'm trying to convey in April and now, that is impossible to do in a year. Now, I get making small steps towards that, and I think we're doing it. But we have not anywhere close to figuring this out for this summer. And that's why I pleaded with this commission in April to say, for this summer, let this commission be the responsible for dealing with special events and forget it for this summer. Because this is going to be a long journey. And I'm not going to support any of it until I hear from parks about building use, until I hear about parks use, and how all this fits in together, because it all overlaps. And having these presentations hit and miss on different nights where it implies that they're separate is even more confusing than any of this paperwork that still is calling it a special event, even when the Parks Department says those don't exist.
I appreciate the complexity of it all, because what we're doing is trying to work really hard to simplify this.
I know, but I guess my point is, if this would have been listened to months ago, we would have maybe been there by now.
Well, how could it be? Because if you say it's
Well,
going to take...
because this has been pushed down the ramp for
it'll
years.
It'll probably, as you're saying, it'll probably take a year. But please keep in mind that there are, what we're trying to work toward is actually better than what's happening now. So if we decide, if the decision is just, if the decision is, let's just forget the whole thing.
No, but I think we should forget. I think we should not try to go in this summer halfway, like we did the Concierge Institute, like we did other things. We need to make sure this system is figured out before it gets in place. Because if it's in place and it's not figured out, we're going to end up with the same outcome. We'll talk about that on the next item.
Well, I appreciate that. We'll continue to work on it. And yes, I appreciate the complexity of it. But keep in mind that we are working with all the departments to deal with the complexity, and the departments are working with us. So yes, it's going to take time. But even if you do that, it's not going to be perfect anyway. But you'll be able to work out the kinks over time. And that's what, if you just try it and work out the kinks, that's one option. But if you want to wait, that's fine. I'm all in favor of waiting till you get it in place as perfectly as possible.
I think we should.
I think one of the key points that's come up to me is that it really helps. I don't think any of you have ever put on an event. Have you, either of you done? I mean,
Yes.
you've participated in them, but I mean, have you been?
I actually I was the tournament director for the Northwest Collegiate College.
Okay, so.
Chemeketa. And
So there, I've done a few. They've been very small scale, nothing to the degree that Commissioner Smith has done over the years. I find, and I said this at the very first meeting, I find the definitions completely confusing.
Yeah, they are.
And I consider myself to be a fairly educated person. They do not make sense. They need to be simplified down. I agree with what you said about the Parks Department saying it's a park rental. That can be clear and understandable to the public. I want to use a park, it's a park rental. It's not a signature event, it's not a this thing, it's not a that thing. Figure out a way to cut the definitions in half so that it is clear and understandable to somebody who does this stuff. Because I don't do this, but I still don't know what it means. And even though you've defined, it's too confusing. it's really confusing. So please don't be defensive about it and tell me that you guys came up with this. It's confusing. He has already told you that it's confusing. I think it's confusing. And I've read this several times. It's
Too many times, actually.
yes, it's got to be honed down to something that is clear and understandable and has some specificity so that, because I can tell you, people who put on events, they're sweating bullets. They're stressed out. I mean, I can't even imagine. I'm just participating in some of them and doing things, but I'm not trying to put the whole shebang on.
And so the question is it easier now than it was last year? Absolutely not.
I don't think you should have a 9-page
You've complicated
application.
even more.
A 9-page application sounds completely strange to me.
But keep in mind, this is a city, we're talking about two different things. This is a city-sponsored event
I still
program.
don't understand what that means.
Says
So
that
again,
all events, signature or not, go through your department. That's
right.
what your report says.
That's exactly right. They do, but.
So don't say it's only signature events, it's
for those,
everything.
yeah, right. But for those
to
projects,
me, there's something wrong there. I don't understand why all the events that are
Because they're
people,
trying to create a process that goes through every department, and that's the right way to do it.
but not
they're
everything is tourism. So let's say I want to rent the senior center because I want to have my bar mitzvah there. Am I going to go through this process, or am I going to call the senior center and say, "Hi, Kathy, I'd like to rent the senior center for my bar mitzvah"?
Today, as it is, you'd probably call Kathy, but that's different in
So
every
am I going to
building,
be
that's my
calling
point.
the Economic Development Department to put on my bar mitzvah at the senior center?
all up in the air.
Which is a private event. You know, I'm only inviting my friends and family, but the way this thing is, I agree with you. It says all events. So what is it? Is it my private bar mitzvah, or is it, what is it?
I think this is the signature event topic, but eventually tourism and economic development needs to come and make a presentation with parks about how all this works across the board. Because there's so many questions, and I don't think you've even thought of all of the questions that I've thought of, but I'll follow back up with this because I know that there's several different events that are happening in the next month or are in process of going through right now that are having complications going through this process already and getting multiple answers from different departments.
So is my bar mitzvah happening to go through this process?
no.
Okay. So then it's not all events.
No, it's not.
It's gotta be
It's only
very-
those two, it's only those two categories. You have a marquee event and you have a city regional event.
The report says they all go through you.
All those types, those, in terms of those two.
Well,
No, that's not what it says. It says one application form for all special public events, no matter what the event, where the event takes place, or what public services or assets are needed. And then second bullet point, one application intake portal, no matter where the event takes place, or what public services are required. That's what it says.
All right.
so
Well,
you need to clarify that then.
We'll work on clarifying those points, and we appreciate that, the complexity.
By the way, I think it should all go through one system.
By the way,
because
you're
that's
all
the only way
invited
it's
to
gonna
my
work.
bar mitzvah, by the way. So just to be clear here.
Good luck with the rental.
Sir,
I'll just say this, as a former business manager of a giant business unit, you got to live by a couple principles. Make it easy to do business with you, and don't get in your own way. And right now, we're not making it easy to do business with us, and we're getting in our own way. And I know that even this person that asked about parking, when it became a special event. My God, they asked Gail, and Gail referred them to the Parks
how did that
Department.
become a special
How
event?
do I know? I wasn't there. I'm just telling you
That's what
they're.
happens when you go through Parks Department.
Yeah, and then it was, they had to wait 30 days and they didn't know.
I mean,
and-
I've lived this for 20 years, you guys, so
Yeah.
I don't need people to tell me how it works and how, I get it. I don't need to get it anymore. I've got it, I'm done with it. We need to fix it, and we need to fix it soon. We're missing the summer, and I knew we would, and that's so unfortunate, and I apologize to the events that are looking forward to us figuring this out, but it ain't gonna happen, maybe next year.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Commissioner Morrow has something.
Well, my questions and concerns have already been addressed. So I'm fine to move on.
Just for my clarification, why don't you just reiterate them again? So that,
I don't think it's necessary.
no, you don't know in the detail, just, you've got some questions, so just make sure we hit.
Those are not the ones.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
so just tell me. I'm keeping notes of what I'm trying to understand what everybody's issues are.
Well, it was specifically related to the definitional aspects.
Okay.
And then the complexity of the application, which I believe they understand is of the utmost importance here, making it user-friendly. So I don't see a need to push that any further right now.
Okay, thank you, I appreciate the clarification.
If they're going to go over it on June 14th as a staff, and we're not going to get it till the day of our meeting on the 15th, I have concerns about that, because that meeting is going to...
We're not bringing this back next Wednesday.
We're not.
No way.
Okay.
Yeah, Commissioner Smith and Commissioner O'Donnell are going to be zooming in from out of town.
Yeah, it'd be there's obviously significant concerns that need to be addressed, as well as having two folks on Zoom would be it's too hard.
It just somehow got way complicated, and I don't, as these things do.
It's always been complicated.
Have there been private meetings between your department and Commissioner Smith to address things in a more conversational?
We've tried to meet with the commissioner, but we can't get on his schedule.
Oh, that is a lie.
That is not a lie.
Then
It
get
is a
on it
lie.
then.
We can meet tonight after this meeting.
I would welcome that one,
Let's
but
do
that
that.
is, I don't appreciate.
No, I do have a very busy schedule. I have met with economic development, not since Daniel's been hired, on this topic months and months ago, going over the same kind of issues, as well as Parks Department on numerous occasions. So I'm willing to do it again, but I don't think it needs to, because I don't like the fact that we ask sidebar meetings for meetings that are happening right now. I've told in multiple meetings and tonight what my concerns are. If those aren't addressed at the next meeting, that's it. There's no need to have another meeting.
The system is complicated to begin with, as you've indicated.
Okay, I think
We're
good.
The existing system is complicated to begin with, but what we're trying to do is trying to better coordinate between the various departments. Now, yes, okay, fine, there's more work to be done, and we'll do that work. But it's complicated just to begin with. We didn't make it more complicated because we haven't implemented anything yet. So we have an existing system that we're going to have to work with.
So which department becomes a single point of contact for the event applicant from beginning to end?
For a
signature event or a regular event?
In the future, as you envision it?
I envision one application going through one portal, and it can be economic development for city-sponsored events, as well as other kinds of events that address the tourism, that helps with tourism and that help with, whether they're marquee events. Because we have two categories. We have marquee and city-level events. Now, that's just in this program. But then what we're also trying to do at the same time is trying to coordinate with all the other departments to make the whole process much more simpler and much more coordinated. But I guess the issue is we're trying to do too much at one time. Because when we first started this conversation, we started just to talk about city-sponsored events, which basically means that the city would pay for certain assets, and that's where we started. And then there was an opportunity. Well, let's look at the entire system, and maybe we can work with the entire system. It just happened that the city-sponsored event started this conversation with looking at a larger event within the departments.
This conversation was started 10 years ago. I know you can't take the blame for that. I'm telling you, though, this conversation has been going on that long.
My interest is in the future state of affairs. I don't want the applicant to have to say, well, what am I, first of all, and then where should I go? And then make a call, and then get referred, and then get referred. That's why I said, can we establish a single point of contact for both incoming and response to the applicant?
And see, what you just said is what I envision too.
Okay, well, that's what we want. So then the rest
Only
of
if
it,
it's tourism related. If it's not, it goes somewhere else.
We'll work on the process. We'll continue to work on the process.
Okay? I'm just saying what you just said a moment ago. As long as it was in tourism, that would go through them, you.
We'll continue to work on the process.
I
because
hope it's simpler than that.
It's very challenging to begin with, and we're simply just trying to coordinate it better, and it's going to take some time.
I think you may be correct in the fact that it's a very big apple, and I commend you for trying to corral it. I don't have the depth of experience that Commissioner Smith does, because all the stuff I've done is very small. But maybe breaking it down, and I'm sure you've all thought of this, breaking it down into smaller component parts so that, I don't know, did you do like a mind map of something on the, what are the pieces and how do they all fit together? I mean, I would have a hard time keeping track of all this if I didn't have it like graphically laid out on some whiteboard with Post-it notes saying, okay, you want to do this, what are the things you need to do? And maybe you've already done all that, but that's kind of how my brain is trying to understand it. And I'm not trying to make this overly complicated, but I know the players that have generally been involved in this particular venue over the years. And there's certain events that, happen or were happening before COVID on a regular basis. So we've got some experience with that. It seems like you guys are taking on an awful lot of stuff, and I don't know how you're possibly getting all this done. You're going to be doing this loan program, you're trying to do this, you're trying to do that. You only have 3 people, unless you guys have clones back in the office that we don't know about, and that Tony's doesn't know about either. I don't know how you're doing all this.
Well, we don't mind working hard.
No, nobody minds working hard, but you need, what you're saying, work hard, work smart.
yep.
So I don't have a solution to how to resolve this. I'm just saying that, again, we all seem to be confused by the definitions. I think I heard that to a person.
Yes.
So that is something that needs to go back to super simplifying it, clarifying his points. I hope, it's recorded so we've got all of this. So it applies to everything or it only applies to certain things. And that needs to be clear throughout the document so that it's not being picked apart by saying, well, what do you mean by this when it doesn't refer back to something else? I'm just trying to say, how do we logically get from here to here? I really hope you're going to be leaving town, but I hope before you leave this meeting tonight that you can set up some time, because maybe there's something that we're missing. I don't know. You've got the experience, Rocky, and you know what it takes to do this.
I gotta be honest, I'm getting frustrated.
I know you
clearly,
are.
because I've had this conversation 30 times in the last 10 years.
Well, they weren't here 10 years ago.
I understand that. But that also shows the problem that this city has in transitioning from one staff to another and making sure that that follows through. Things get left, and sometimes I think intentionally don't come back to the commission for months. Not necessarily this particular item, but the fact that the Parks Department had waited since Dan Holiday to come back to us on this topic, it shows a lot. That still hasn't come back to us, park use and rentals. So I hope this conversation, every time this conversation is happening about signature events, it's with Parks Department and together as a dual, and it should be presented that way.
I would say what I see in dealing with tourism companies is their planning horizon is a year ahead of time, at least. I mean, I just had an email from one that said they're planning their 2023 stuff now. And we need to be doing that. Commissioner Smith has so much experience. You know, I listened to what he said, and I agree, you know, it's not for the event organizer to get the permits they're calling on him to get. It's for the individual vendors. I was curious about if you're an event organizer and you've got 20 vendor spaces, maybe you sell out 10 initially, and they're completed and they're submitted with the application. But what about the other 10? Are they just informed that before you're allowed to provide services, you need to submit this, or is the whole application held up? Did you understand that question?
I did not understand your question. I mean, it sounds as if what you were saying is that does the event organizer require all of the vendors to have their permit before making application?
Well, I don't see that as a possibility, because if you have 20 spaces to fill, the event organizer may have filled 10, with 10 to be filled sometime.
I think we're suggesting that that's not a reasonable expectation, and that shouldn't be in the application.
But it sounds like it currently is, so a
We're
future
saying,
state.
yeah, we're saying we think that it should not be.
Yeah, they just need to be informed that prior to offering services, they need to have these permits in place.
Well, and I think we need to talk about, you know, requiring a vendor that's just doing a weekend event that is not from Oregon City, to require them to get a business license is a huge step. However, there should be a process for
Like a
temporary event business licenses that are, you know, $10, $15 or whatever for special events, where the event coordinator can say, so that we're getting that economic development back into the department by saying special, you know, event permit for a business license for that weekend, and they go through the city. But that would be the individual vendor doing that and being accountable for that. And that's a whole big process in itself. So there's so many of these little aspects. I'm trying to say that this is so much. And I get that we're making progress, but to try and start this midsummer, I think is a mistake. Yeah. Because we're gonna try to get through the summer, and people that go through that process are gonna learn that and expect that. And we're just better to say, wait, we're gonna wait till we got it figured out, and so we don't have to reteach everybody again once we figured it out.
Okay, Madam President, I think we've exhausted this topic. We're ready for the next one.
Well, we're taking a 5-minute break as per request. So let's come back at no later than, not 12, 8:37. It's the cold air.
And we are live again.
All right. We are reconvening the work session. We are now down to the topic of the Economic Development Strategic Plan, and this is still the Economic Development Department Roadshow.
So, as you know, we've made several presentations, not only before you, but before different groups and organizations. So we're here just to have a discussion and try to answer your questions.
Go right ahead.
Was this officially ever adopted by the commission?
No, not yet.
Why not? Why does it say final draft then?
It just says draft.
Yeah, it
Okay,
doesn't
so,
say.
but also it says information only on this report with no information about when it's coming back to us.
The intent is to bring this back to the commission to be approved via resolution, but there's,
When?
as soon as we can get through everyone getting their questions answered into a place where we're comfortable bringing it for a hearing.
Okay, well, I guess my worry is that every day that goes by, we're using this plan and implementing it. The last topic states that. It's only come to us at work sessions, never to a regular meeting. And in this report, it doesn't imply that. It just says information only. When everything else says returning back to us, or at least returning back to the commission for approval, that doesn't say that, so it's vague. I don't think if it's a draft, we should be implementing it. And it should come to us to sign off for changes. And I guess one of the concerns, and I've stated this concern multiple times, there was no input from the tourism stakeholders on this strategy. There was a question asked by myself at several meetings ago whether or not there was any tourism representative on the committee to work on this strategic plan, and the answer was Victoria Miney, who had no idea that she was a rep for tourism because she wasn't. So that was worrisome of my own, myself being on the tourism stakeholders group, but also so much of the strategic plan refers to the tourism strategy, which has gone through a year or more of multiple programs, Concierge Institute, Art Treasure Trove, all these. But not once has the tourism stakeholders group had a conversation about what of those projects have been effective, what were successes, what were failures, what needs to be changed. None of that has been asked by the stakeholders. And so continually saying that these various projects, like the one on the agenda tonight that refers to, well, we're just implementing this plan, that's a final draft that hasn't been approved, and this assumption that just because the budget was approved, that somehow gives a rubber stamp on these things. As you know, the budget can change at any moment, and we could bring it back and change it. We could also change this plan at any moment, but it would be helpful to get input for the people that were involved, especially on the tourism end, that haven't been involved in this strategy at all. No representation in tourism on this strategy at all.
Can I have some direction from the commission on how we can remedy that? Would you like us to stop and restart this plan?
I will tell you how you can remedy it. You could have had a tourism stakeholders meeting. No, you could still do this. You could do this month. You could have a tourism stakeholders meeting where we had a discussion of which things were successes and failures. That could be brought back to this commission. All that stuff is information that we should, have to understand whether or not that check that we wrote, or some of us wrote when we passed the budget, which I was not a part of, knowing that these projects that we are creating and programs that we are presenting that weren't specified at all in the budget, and now are coming to light. How do we know what has been successful, what has not, and then move forward? I think that needs to be the first step. That could have happened already, but we keep bringing it work sessions and saying, well, it's for information and it's coming back and whatever. But I'm not going to say anything more of it. I'm clearly not happy with where we're at in economic development. I think we have a lot of great things on paper. We have nothing to show for it. And I feel like we have made progress. But when we're writing these large amount of checks, and by the way, in terms of tourism, I have been so vocal about supporting tourism in this town, and it's an ironic and interesting process to be a part of, where we have now set aside a whole lot of money in economic development for tourism, and I feel we're blowing it. And I'm not the only one. And so to not have that dialogue with these tourism stakeholders, and then to imply that our schedules are too busy to meet, is a little bit bizarre. I'm not going to say anything more about this topic or anything else, because I've said enough, and I hope I can rely on the rest of the commission to finally listen to some of the things that I've been saying when I have been involved in tourism in this town for 25 years, and I know what I'm talking about.
We've functioned and tried to provide economic development and tourism based on a budget for years. And now we've tried to put it into a plan to try to get adopted with some consensus and agreement about what direction we're going to go as a snapshot in time, realizing that is going to change. We've spun up multiple new programs to try to implement these. At some point, I please give us direction. Do you want us to like, I will, if you want me to bring it in a regular meeting, I will please tell me where to bring this, to have the conversation, to try to get this approved.
Well, I
or
guess
to just say, let's scrap it and start over, or what?
Or
we need direction on what to do.
Or
I'm not putting this in a work session to circumvent your ability to have I thought this is exactly what you wanted, was to come back and talk about this because there were questions and concerns. If you want that in a regular meeting, I'll put it in a regular meeting. Just please give us direction on how to move this. We have to approve something to at least start saying this is where we're at. Or we don't have to.
Nowhere in here does it say it was going to be approved or come to us back. It says information only. So was it just going to be a draft until the end of the budget cycle?
I'll put it on whichever commission meeting you want. We can vote it up or down.
Put it on the 15th. Let's vote on it.
Frank or Adam, do you have any more questions about the economic development strategy? I've already submitted all of my questions to them that I had, so I feel like mine have been addressed.
Well, it's appropriate for me to comment because I do attend meetings and did attend the last meeting. I think it's important as a general observation, reading some of the comments made in this report, that approval of the budget does not necessarily mean commission approval of specific programs within the budget. It doesn't give the operators free rein. Now, Mr. Graham might think that we're taking managerial authority away from them. We're not. No more than we take it away from John Lewis when he's expending money to take care of public works things. I think where I struggle, and I'm a big fan of I want us to succeed, but we have not, in my estimation, delivered any measurable successes. We seem to be working on frameworks, the behind-the-scenes stuff, but we don't have anything to demonstrate that we now, I put this in terms of inviting someone to dinner, but not having the table set. And I don't think we have the table set. We don't have our deliverables in place. And Mr. Graham and I have had these conversations. It's not a surprise to him, nor would I do that. But just the simplicity, and maybe I shouldn't say simplicity because it seems insurmountable. Our historical offerings are important. To get them a commonality of ticketing and operating hours seems to be an insurmountable task. And that's one of our great offerings. And I think it would be one of the simplest we could convey. You know that I want to bring marine commercial traffic to Oregon City. And now I find out there are boats that already qualify, that I could bring 30 to 40 people here at a time. But what am I going to offer them when they come here? So I think I'm concerned that we've expended a lot of dollars on advertising to attract people here, but I'm also concerned about the effects that if you sell that aspect of it, but you don't deliver, you will be placed in a position to have to overcome negative reviews for a long time. So I think we've got our operations a bit out of sync, and we can disagree, but I feel like first you have to have your offerings in place, and then you bring your guests to your table and say, look what I have for you, and we don't. And that's why I'm concerned about expenditures and a plan that demonstrates, got to demonstrate some successes. And I know you're working on the behind the scenes stuff. I know you are. We've had that conversation. But we need to get our assets in place, our offerings in place, and then bring our clientele in and not reverse. So the plan is again, it's an overview, but each of those does not essentially have approval of the commission just because the budget itself is approved. And again, that's my example was Mr. Lewis in Public Works. So if we need to regroup and say, here's how we want to approach this, Mr. Graham might think that we're taking his management authority away from him. We're not. We're just trying to say, this is what we'd like to see, and this is what would be a success, could be a measured success. There should be, you're putting in some things about keeping track of contacts you made. That's good. How many contacts have you made? Who have you spoken to? When I supervised a group of sales engineers, if we were on a meeting and they said, I talked to 15 people this week, that's really nice. But what did it generate in terms of sales? Nothing. Well, then you had 15 conversations with no sales. Let's make some sales. But I just feel like our deliverables are not measurable. And I wish they were. And I don't want to be critical of the behind the scenes work you're doing to put things in place. I understand that. Website and customer tracking and all, that would be good to see. But there has to be something that people can see that go, that's a success. I mean, there's something where you can say, I have increased visitorship to these facilities by this amount. So hopefully you have a baseline. And now I've advertised and I've coordinated my offerings. And now my attendance is up to this. So I wish I was happier with the results we're getting, but I feel like we've lost this year. We're already entering the tourism season and our assets aren't in place. So if we have to regroup and say, okay, we'll plan for 2023, just like we talked about this last item, then let's do that. And let's do it together, not adversarial. That's my thoughts on it.
Thank you for the presentation, first of all. And on the topic of deliverables, I'm thinking back to the advertising campaign that we ran. Are we still on the airwaves, or has that been completed?
That particular commercial is over.
Okay, and what was the duration of that?
I think it was 4 weeks.
A little bit closer, James.
Oh, I'm sorry. I
It's
think it was
just
about
hard to, we're just thinking about the.
It was about 4 weeks.
4 weeks? Mm-hmm. Would it be possible to get numbers on that? Like, do we have there are many different metrics. Do we have like a gross rating point? Do we have any sort of metrics on how that performed?
That commercial was our first commercial, and it was simply designed to introduce Oregon City for the holidays. And,
Right.
and that's all it was. We wanted to see whether or not we can produce it. And so it was simply, in itself, it was a pilot. So, I mean, we have made a lot of progress on our economic development. There are lots of strategies, as one of you said, that haven't been implemented all over the place. But we are actually trying to implement a strategy. And whether it is, we actually developed 5 programs to implement tourism, because this tourism plan had been on, you had a tourism plan right here that has been on the shelf for 2.5 years, easy. And then we came up with 5 programs that actually implemented this tourism plan. And we made a presentation before you, and you actually approved them. Then we're having more stakeholder meetings. We just had one recently, and we had one before that. We're picking it up because at one point we lost our tourism specialist, so we were doing a lot of things. So a lot is going on, and I think that like in the strategic plan, it is aspirational, just like the Oregon City tourism. This is aspirational, it's not even detailed. So, and you paid $70,000 for this one. So, the strategic plan that we have today actually identifies our weaknesses, our strengths, and we do have weaknesses, and we have strengths, and we have opportunities, and we have threats. And it has identified all of these things but you've got to recognize that Oregon City is a community in the making. The tourism industry is very small, it's mediocre, it's very small, and it takes time to build it. The economic development side of Oregon has a great opportunity to really grow this city, but economic development is more than chasing companies around the place. There's a lot of things that we've put in place in order to attract investment. Like, for instance, childcare. Childcare is still important to a lot of companies. And we've talked with several companies that are willing and interested in getting involved. But these kinds of conversations that we're having right now is not helpful in marketing Oregon City, because it creates doubt in any investor. And quite frankly, you have an experienced staff. We've worked very hard to put in place a strategic plan that didn't exist and never existed. And now we're trying to implement something that is
Can you repeat what you just said?
You never implemented a strategic plan, an economic development strategic plan. You've never implemented one.
We didn't have one under Eric.
But you've never implemented
Just clarifying.
one. So I would say I'm proud of this economic development strategic plan because it's the beginning plate. This is the first year of having one. So I am very proud of what we've done and what types of programs that we've identified, but it takes time to implement anything. You can't implement it overnight. There is a new economic development. It's more than just simply chasing companies. It's you putting in place strategies to attract investment to your community. And this is what we've done. We've talked to you, Adam Morrow, and we talked about childcare. We've given you a briefing. I'd like to hear more from you with regard to the strategic plan. Commissioner McGriff, we've answered her questions with regard to the strategic plan. But I just think it's getting a bum rap because I think it's getting a bum rap for a variety of reasons. Now, what you really want is certain organizations in this town to make input. Like, for instance, I have found that when we ask certain people for advice, and then we tell certain people that we've asked for advice, oh, that doesn't count. It all depends on who you talk to. That means something to people. And so that's interesting in and of itself to me. So you tell me who you want DOCA to approve everything? You tell me that. Or you want specific organizations to approve everything? You tell me that.
No, I would just like to have a representative of tourism on the stakeholders group for a strategy that is a big part tourism.
Well,
That's not a lot to ask.
No, it's not, but they're involved in our stakeholders meeting as we go forward. And they've been present.
But the stakeholders group has not been involved in fine-tuning that strategy or looking at the projects from the last year and deciding and talking about having a discussion about which ones were successes, which ones were not, and fine-tuning that strategy.
Commissioner
That needs
Smith,
to happen.
Commissioner Smith, the stakeholders, when I came on board, the stakeholders group actually were called and actually helped design the 5 programs.
Yeah, and I was here for that.
You were here, and so therefore they actually helped design the same program. So
Actually, well, that's not exactly true, but,
to say that they have not been involved, that's not true.
okay,
It's not really true. So I guess the city manager is correct. What do you want to do?
I would like to see it brought to us the next meeting.
Well, I think with you guys being gone, to me, that's not reasonable.
Okay, let's put it off for another couple months.
Well, no, we can put it on the August agenda when you will all be here.
Do what you want, I don't care anymore.
Well, I think you do care, that's why you're commenting.
But
So,
I've been commenting for years on it.
well, again, we're starting with a different beginning point.
You can say whatever you want.
I know, but we can't go.
You can make as many excuses as you
I'm
want.
not making an excuse, I'm just telling you, we cannot put on this process what happened in the past, because that is in the past. The past is past. The
I'm
person.
talking about today.
Yes, so let's talk.
And tomorrow.
Yes, so let's talk about today and tomorrow. Yes, I would agree with you that I was disappointed that there wasn't somebody representing tourism, because Victoria Mining is not that person.
And then to be told that someone was, and that wasn't true,
Well, and she
is a
even
whole
said
nother
that.
level.
So that's water under the bridge. If I had been running the stakeholder steering committee for economic development, I would have had them meet regularly. I would have taken parts of this document. I would have asked them their feedback.
Absolutely.
Rather than, because a lot of these people don't have any skin in the game.
It's common sense.
And they're great people. I know some of them on this list. Greater Portland, this wasn't a regular process, but that's water over the bridge. So I guess part of what I'm asking about, and I've had, again, a lot of my questions answered because I asked them. We've got some things that have been accomplished in here in terms of milestones. And so maybe the way to revise this slightly is to talk about the things so I'm looking at page, let me see here. Page 49, I just happened to flip through it. So you have here, strategic, develop a vision as framework for decision-making through series of retreats, a new vision, blah, blah, December 2021. So you said we did that, right? So are there other things on here that need to be updated to make them more current? So by April 2022, did we update the financial and components? I think we did. So, let's update those types of things that will make it more current. I'm not diminishing their capacity, but at this point, I don't know how much input. I guess I would like to ask you, how would you see the stakeholder committee, the tourism stakeholder committee inputting this? Now, obviously, both you and I participated as city commissioners. And I will say for the record, unfortunately, the one you have scheduled for the 22nd, I'm taking over 2 responsibilities of Mayor Rachel Lyle Smith. I'm in meetings from 5 o'clock until after 9 with those. I cannot go to the tourism stakeholders. And my group is counting on me to represent them. And I just said I physically can't divide myself. Not yet. My clone is still in the development stage, so I can't. So I feel like I'm letting you down because I can't do that, but I also have to be South Fork, I also have to be MPAC. And there's some big heavy-duty issues going on with those 2 groups that our presence and Oregon City's presence needs to be there. So I'm gonna have to and I don't have anybody to replace me because the people in my group don't have the breadth of knowledge that I do with regard to when we started this to where we are now. So I'll have to figure out some other way to input to you on this without physically being present on the 22nd. So you'll have to help me figure that one out. So maybe that is a way to look at this. So for instance, we've got the broadband survey that's out by now, and I want to tell you, I have been promoting it. I talked about it at CIC last night, encouraging people to fill it out.
And these are accomplishments.
Right. But again,
These are accomplishments.
Let's talk about fixing those little things in there to say whether they've been accomplished or not, or how, so that somebody looking at this is, well, it says timeline, March 2022. Well, did they do it? Well, we'll put in here that we did do it, or we changed the deadline. However, we need to change that. So I would like to see this get revised and come back to a regular meeting so we can vote on this and move this forward. I appreciate Mr. Conkle handed this out, and I had just a few moments to kind of look it over. I appreciate this because I think this is helpful. I think maybe what would be also helpful just for my benefit, maybe it's the others. So under the tourism promotion. So I know, just from what you've said, that's ads and whatever. So whatever else was under that subcategory, maybe there's, this is kind of that's what it got used for. I'm not asking specific amounts, I'm just saying, what do we use it for? So tourism program, what did we do in that? That would help make this a little more clear. I know we've got the hotel motel tax coming in. Have we decided, in the budget, where do we decide that's going? Where are those funds that we've got here? Let me get over here to the right category here. So we're projecting that in 2021-22, we're going to have 205, 156. So in 2021, the 153. So does that go back into programming? Does that go back into promotions? In the old days, and I say old days, we had the OCCIT, right. Oregon City Civic Improvement Trust. We knew that's where the hotel motel tax was going.
Right, and so that's one of the reasons I've been asking for this for a long time, because all the money that you see there from hotel motel tax used to always go specifically for tourism programming.
Right, and back into the community.
Not for staffing, not for programming, I mean actual events. Okay, and so if you look at all that money that we've set aside, that money was supposed to be set aside for the hope that we would fine-tune a grant process, and that was never determined that this was going to stay like this. So when we're looking at the amount of money that's been set aside that normally would have gone to all the events in this town, are we okay with that? Because that's not the way it was, and we had set that money aside as part of our tourism plan before you got here to say that that money was to be set aside so that we could determine things like the signature event process and all these things, and to figure that out. We never did it. And so that money has been diverted. Another reason I've voted against most of the budgets in the last few years, because that was never the intention. And so to now finally see this on paper, it's going to be nice to share this with all the other heritage groups and all the other people who would have normally got that money for events and see where it went. Because they want to know that, especially when we don't know the outcome of the Concierge Institute yet, and how that relates to the grant funding and how that relates to those groups getting their funds. We're not there yet, and that's why I hope we're getting there. But right now, everyone can say there were great elements of the Concierge Institute. However, everyone that was a part of it was told that that would end up being connected with funding for people that participated. That has not happened.
No, that has happened. That has happened.
Well, we don't know about it.
Well, yes.
And
every tourism organization knows about it. And also every tourism site they have a challenge. Every historic site has a challenge.
I understand that, and I hear from them daily, and I will promise you they are not saying what you're saying.
Well, they're not they're not being honest with us. Because we've actually, one or two of them have interns now. And matter of fact, the what house is that? Stephen
Okay,
Cross.
so,
Stephen Cross.
so one of the questions that we've asked about that is, if we now know, after months of asking how that money goes from the Concierge Institute to these organizations, I'm glad to hear that's happening. However, we still don't know how that is affecting what I said was a major concern. If you start writing checks to individual groups about their special needs, how does that not add to competition between those organizations? How are you making sure that's equitable? How are you making sure that the other organizations were part of that to say that this is the priority at this site, not just this one site saying this is what we need and writing them a check? That is completely different than having a tourism stakeholders group that looks at all the needs of the tourism world and says, we agree, this is the priority, we all agree it's where this money is spent. That's why CHP fell apart. That's why these museums are not talking to each other and working together. You have to understand that if those individual organizations are put in a position to compete with each other, this all falls apart. And everything we spent the last 10 years building, not you, me, and downtown, and Jonathan Stone, and everyone before that, that's what that tourism plan is for. And we're not there. And if you can't, you have to see that all as a whole. And you have to understand where we've gone and how we got here to know that. And I want you to all please listen, because we're not there. And, you know, I just plead with you to start looking into this stuff. If you don't trust what I'm saying, spend the next 20 years investigating it and living it.
So you'll recall my original question was, could we get some media performance metrics? Would that be possible?
Yeah. We have performance metrics on, matter of fact, beyond the commercial, we've had a number of social media promotions. And matter of fact, we can actually show the metrics in terms of how people have responded. Because we've basically have advertised at various historic sites. We've advertised certain types of programs through social media, and we have the numbers to show what the response is.
So why are you not telling us that? Toot your
Because I
own
was going to
horn.
bring that
Toot
into-
your own horn.
That was actually where we were bringing to the stakeholders meeting. We were putting together, because prior to this, my predecessor did not have adequate tracking, and I now have that in place. And Commissioner Marl, the question I can actually ask KATU, I believe they do have those metrics related to how well that performance for that TV ad during the November.
And DOCA has had it for 5 years.
I think we're looking for certain things that I think you're capable of delivering. When you run an ad, do you see a measurable upswing in attendance?
Yes.
Do you have those figures?
Yes, so
Okay,
as I've
good.
been performing these, I've actually contacted each of the organizations and gotten feedback on how much of an improvement, if it was static or if it was a negative number, so that we could make that assessment. And so far, every single organization has replied back to me of either it's an improvement. For example, this weekend, we just had the Extraordinary Garden Tour. They were shocked by being able to have 100 people attend their event. And it was something that we actually just did a simple, quick promotion for, and they were very happy with that.
And that's what we're looking for. It's a principle of business that which you can't measure, you can't control. So if you're measuring it, you get a cause-effect relationship.
Correct.
And that should be, if you want to call it toot your own horn, if you want to call it demonstrated successes, do that. You're implementing a CRM, which stands for Customer Relationship Management. You should document every meeting you have and what was discussed. I had my salespeople do it for me. What did you do? What did you talk about? What was the outcome? What's the next steps? So hopefully you're going to use that CRM effectively, because you said you had it in the report. So that's modern management. Use it, because that's how you let things keep control of some things. If you talked about what would I like to see, as Mr. Conkle asked, I've struggled because I think we've lost. Our time to market is not effective. And I don't know if it's because we're late to the game or we let ourselves be late to the game. Like I said, people are planning a year in advance. Okay, maybe we've lost the opportunity this year, and we'll make do with what we have, but we need to see stuff in place. So my first question would be, if I was a startup business or if I was a struggling business, what would I do? Well, I would identify that which I had to sell. What resources do I have that I can immediately sell? And I think that's a sit-down meeting with specific people. I'm curious, have you ever had a group meeting that involved our first resources we could sell? Like the Rose Farm, the Ermitinger House, the end of the Oregon Trail, the Stephen Crawford. Did we ever get them all in one room and talk?
Yes.
We did. And what was the outcome of that meeting?
Basically status quo.
What?
Basically, it's status quo.
Status quo is a losing proposition.
Correct.
So what can you do to drive?
So, for example, Stephen Crawford's house, we were able to get an intern to help them extend their hours to 5 days. So they're now open, except for she unfortunately just got a concussion and is not able to be there. But our whole point is that we were able to extend it to 5 days, Wednesday through Sunday.
See, we need to get all these resources on board, ready to market, and available to visitors. And then, hopefully, I don't know where we're at, are there pamphlets printed?
We're in the process of putting together a travel planner.
Pamphlets, okay.
Yeah, as
And
well as
is there a map of Oregon City attractions?
Correct, yes, there is.
Good.
It's in the process.
And when will that process come to a conclusion?
In the next 10 days.
Good.
See, that should have been in your report.
See, that's what this.
That should have been in the report. I mean, I only know about it because I was contacted by Ray Gordon, who asked me some information. You're not telling, as I said before, I will say this again, more information for me is better than no information. I want to know everything that you know. So for example, in your report that you said we've lost a substantial number of business, how many businesses have we lost in Oregon City? I mean, because of whatever. Was it 10? Was it 12? Was it 2? I don't know that. So again, because I get asked, like he does, a lot of questions about things, the more that you can tell me, the more that I can parrot it back to whoever's asking me the question. Then I say, and if you want more information, call Dan Gehring, which is what I say. So let me make a comment here. I was one of the people that planned the schedule for the Rose Farm. We had to do that in January. If I'd known in January that I had an opportunity to get an intern, I could be training them now. Mm-hmm. I don't have that opportunity. I'd still like to have one because that would help. Right now, I'm the only trained docent that they have. So I can train somebody, but I need to get the somebody to train them to be open more. Otherwise, they can't. So we can talk offline more about that. If I'd known this, again, you may have talked about the stakeholders, but I've got another hat I got to wear. So if I'd known that, I would have put in for one and said, because I think I checked the box saying, yes, we do. So I turned that in. Another story about how I got in trouble about that, but that's neither here nor there. But part of it is somebody can't just walk off the street and do a tour at any of the museums that know that. So I've got flashcards, I've got information. Somebody could read them. Doesn't matter if they read them. But if they're there doing it, that's great. And I would love to have that. So I'm putting on that other hat just to tell you how that's affecting me. So I'm doing 2 tours, what's today, Wednesday, Friday. So 27 fourth graders, it'll be exciting.
Awesome.
So tell us more information, share the information. If it's one thing that I hear from the constituents out there, people in economic development keep the information too close to their chest and they don't share information. You guys have a wealth of knowledge. Share it and train other people to help you do your jobs better. It doesn't help to keep all the information to yourself so that nobody else can do it. You've got partners out there that want to partner with you. It's not proprietary information. Share it. Help the community help you do your jobs better, because that's who's going to help you. All those people out there have connections that you guys don't have, but they can be a resource to you.
Or they're going to decide to take it over on their own.
Well, they don't have the facility or
No,
ability
if
to
all
take it
the
over.
organizations get together, because remember, as we talked about at the last stakeholders meeting, it was never
I know,
a
and
sure
I
thing
wasn't there, so.
that the city was going to drive tourism. This is a placeholder until we, as a community, decide whether or not it becomes a destination marketing association, whether it's housed under the city, whether it's housed under the chamber. That was never determined. Okay, the plan is to do that and figure out what that form takes.
DMA, so,
So
okay.
this is not the only form there is, and it could change. And if the city doesn't get it together within the next year, I think things will change, and the city beyond the community will drive it.
Yeah, I think.
I hope the city can get together before that happens, but it's been discussed by multiple organizations in this town already.
I think Commissioner O'Donnell has the nail on the head, is that I'm okay with us being a little late to the party. It's okay. We're coming out of COVID. People were coming out of their own cocoons. So this is the time right now that we do the planning so that when we have that first event, we always celebrate Oregon's birthday. That's just sort of a little placeholder. It's not a super big event, but it's a small event. But by the time the tourism season, quote unquote, which is to me all year long, the typical one, we can have a plan in place so that the Holmes House can be open 5 days a week. But with the time frame that we had right now, it just wasn't possible. Because again, I'm not blaming it on COVID, but I am blaming it on there because people are now just kind of emerging and you can see them kind of pulling back as those numbers start to go up. So people are pulling back a little bit. And let's face it, a lot of your volunteers at these museums, they are aging.
So I guess my question would be related to, for us to be able to get to an approval for the strategic plan for economic development, would the tourism reporting be enough to help show you that what we've accomplished in the last 3 months that I've been here?
It would be,
Not for me.
Because I have stats to show
It would-
how social media has improved.
Yeah, it would help because we didn't have that before. I can't speak for Commissioner Morrow, but it would definitely, I'm okay. I'm your biggest fan.
Right. But I have the stats that I think that you're asking for. I'm having, for example, just understanding how much of an improvement I had to make to get the website actually to a point where it was actually usable. We are working diligently to add all the dining properties. That's 110 properties that we have to add to the website. We've got that in process.
110 properties for,
Food and dining.
oh, okay, yes, and it changes regularly.
Including all the coffee shops and the
Yes, it
desserts.
changes regularly.
So we have a lot of elements that are in place. And as Commissioner O'Donnell said, we want to do the best with the key things that we can do, where we're really focused, can do that. That's where I'm the expert. I am that web guy who can give you the stats. I can get the social media up and moving. We went from 8 to 12,000 impressions in front of people in Portland. 8, and that's within just a month and a half.
Portland only or just Portland Metro?
The Portland Metro.
Okay, yeah, because
Yeah.
if it's just Portland, that
So
doesn't-
if those
it's not moving
stats
me.
are what you need to help make a decision that will help get the economic development strategy approved, then I'm happy to put together a dashboard that you guys can all see and watch this live.
I am telling you that information should be forthcoming regardless of the strategy or not. That is information that will help us determine. We can see the metrics. Again, you've got the information. Just tell us what's happening with it, what's going on. Again, more information with this group is better than little information. And when you cite something that, like I said, how many businesses, put the number in there. If you've got a number, don't say many businesses have not gone out of business. 8 left, whatever. It's just quantify and quantify and quantify. I'm used to stuff, from the planning side being pretty clear and objective. And I know this is nebulous, it's a little nebulous, but tourism and economic development is kind of like a cloud. Sometimes you can capture it, sometimes it's going over here, sometimes it's going over there. It's fluid, but there's certain things that you have that are benchmarks that this is happening. If Ann tells me that she contacted some businesses last week, Ann would say, I contacted 10 businesses last week that were in this category. They were doing X, Y, or Z. I mean, it was this category. I contacted manufacturers. Great. Using your example, it may not already result in something right today, but tomorrow, because somebody's going to remember, that you contacted them, and they're going to say, oh, I need to get in touch back with that. Wasn't that person calling me about X, Y, or Z? So, we've all done this. I mean, they haven't, but we've done it.
That's what the CRM does if used effectively.
It's a long game.
It tells you what you've done, it tells you what needs to be done. It's also a tickler file. Go back and see these people, right? The thing you said is important. If you want to do a dashboard, that's great. You and I, we've had some productive discussions. That library meeting was good. Lots of good visionary things. You spoke because I asked, because of my familiarity with website development, how many hits are you getting? You're saying by virtue of your efforts to improve that, our hits are way up. Demonstrate that. Put that as part of our, how many hits we're getting on social media. And then if we can relate that to increase in visitorship, more power to us. But a demonstrated tracking of how effective you are. Now, I think that's a good component on the tourism piece. The economic development piece is tougher in my mind because it's a long game. But I mean, the specifics that Commissioner McGriff asked for. What have we lost? Where is our growth? Where are our opportunities? And again, it's always next steps. Current state, future state. What do we want it to be and how do we get there? But I think the tourism component is more easily managed on a daily basis because it's so apparent, especially this time of year. You can work a long time. You can work a long time to get an economic development success. You can work years to bring something in. So
it takes time.
Go ahead.
Well, it sounds like we can fill in information in addition to what Daniel can provide. We do have information from the CRM system that we're using, Commissioner, and we can tell you how many businesses we've talked to. We can fill in some of the milestones that were in that draft plan, so we can let you know. As you were saying, Commissioner McGriff, March 10th, did you hit that milestone? Yes, we did. We can fill that in and bring it back again and bring it to a vote.
And some of that's going to be very definite. It's going to be not widespread knowledge. Like you're trying to attract a business, a specific business. You're talking to a decision maker. At some point, it's either going to happen or not happen. What's our forecast for a decision? And then we see if we're succeeding. The small stuff, sometimes you work as hard on the small stuff as the big stuff.
It's all, yeah, it is. It is. It takes
Mr.
time.
Graham.
People always say, well, when did that development happen? Well, it was a year and a half before it came out of the ground. I got asked yesterday, when are they going to break ground on the hotel? So I called Dan and I say, when are we breaking ground on the hotel? And that's...
That's right. Well, the strategic plan as it exists now is exactly that, a strategic plan. What you're talking about right now are updates and matrix and measurements as a consequence of implementing this strategic plan. That's what you're really talking about. But right now, we are holding true to what we said we would do. And so therefore, when we share with you the matrices and all the other outcomes that we have accomplished, it just verifies that we're on the right track with this strategic plan.
Okay, well, we'll look forward to that.
But I want to
And it should be on a regular, ongoing basis, not just every 3 to 6 months. Give us an update on what's going on with this.
I still feel strongly that I want to accent the fact that approval of the budget is not a blank check to proceed and do whatever a director wants. Just, again, I'll use John Lewis as an example with his public projects. So if you have a project that you're pursuing, put it forth to the commission. This is our cost. This is our expected return. How do you feel about expending those monies? And it may frustrate you, but that's just the way it works. We need to know where we're going and where these dollars are being spent. But you're still the director and you guys are still the department. And we're not the managers of it. We're policy people and we just want to see growth.
One of the programs also, like this evening, the Entrepreneurial Loan Program, we told you exactly who our partners were and how much we were looking for expending, and also how the program would work. I mean, that's part of the strategic plan. That's an element of this plan. So, and there are other. I mean, every time we've come forward to this body, we've talked about very specific programs in the strategic plan. And whether it was childcare, whether it's the Entrepreneurial Loan Fund, whether it's the Concierge Institute, whether all these programs, we've talked about these things, and it's on record, on the tape. So
But
we've
it's
done
not
that.
been specific, and it's not been
Never
measurable.
specific.
That's the part.
Never been specific.
You've been talking about it, but again, pat yourself on the back and toot your horn and say, we did whatever. I mean, I know what you're doing, but we're trying to make sure that our community knows too, that this is not just out there. And I just thought of a brainstormer project for you, so you're gonna love it.
Too late.
Nope, it's not too late.
Too late for you.
It's a project that needs to be redone, so I'll talk to you after. So, anything else?
No, I think we've conveyed the message, and I hope it's been received.
All right, so how about some updates? Since we don't know when the exciting event's going to happen with Governor Brown, we'll just skip that.
What exciting event.
That's right, it's not happening. So,
Oh,
Mr. Conkle, what is new in the world of city manager-ish?
I don't have any updates at this time. We'll be back next Wednesday. I think we tried to keep that agenda a little bit lighter. So hopefully we
Yeah, we
can
have one proclamation.
get through that a little bit quicker and easier, knowing we've got some remote call-ins we're trying to accommodate.
And Commissioner O'Donnell will be there.
Yeah.
Will.
It's really exciting.
Don't give me that look
You
like.
better have a long reach, is all I can tell.
You do not know how long my reach is. I know people that know people.
Is she still talking to me?
Yes, I'm still talking to you. This is your directive. All right. So I think you don't have anything to report on item A? Beavercreek Employment Blue Ribbon Committee, I think?
Do not, no.
Okay. Citizen Involvement Committee Liaison, and that was me because I went last night in your place.
Thank you.
And you are so welcome. I'm happy to do it at any time. We had a really good meeting, except for the fact that one of our members set off the button, and the police officer showed up because they pressed the button under the counter, which said something was going on in the commission chamber. So that was the excitement for the evening. And Officer Lemon showed up, and I assured him that everything was under control and it was fine. So I appreciate that. Thank you. I'm sorry that happened, but somebody said, what is that? And they pressed it. So we talked, we had an excellent update from Josh Wheeler about the new floodplain information that's being developed by FEMA. And then he answered a question with regard to how the Natural Resources Overlay District, floodplain, and steep slopes all apply, and they do overlap to some degree, but they are separate processes. So that was really good. We had an update from the Downtown Association, and I know it's called, this is one of those, wait for it. So, you know, the building at 7th and 7th and Main, the Oregon City, what does he call the business? Bridgeview Wine and Beer. He has received through DOCA a grant to do some tenant improvements, and I think I will just totally die and go to heaven if that project ever happens, because it's been like that since I moved here. So that was good news. That was very good news. Other than that, we had a representative from the Rivercrest neighborhood who's going to try to reactivate that, and I'm sure you all are aware that the vice chair of the Beavercreek neighborhood, our PRAC vice chair, Karen Morey, passed away this last week, and there will be a service this coming Sunday in her honor. And that was pretty much about it. C4.
Yeah, and just to reiterate with the grant that you and I sat on, the Oregon Main Street Alliance?
Yes, the design, yeah.
Yes.
So we're going to be having a design committee meeting coming up here soon.
Perfect. So yeah, we had a C4 meeting on June 2nd, and the focus of that meeting was on what TriMet is calling Forward Together, which is their comprehensive service analysis for the near term, hopefully post-COVID era, how they want to be targeting ridership. Do they want to be expanding more out outside of the urban core of Portland so that there's, maximum coverage of the metro area, or do they want to go for the areas where they're going to get the maximum amount of ridership? And so that is still in the process, but one exciting update is that it seems very likely that there will be a new connection for TriMet from OC to Tualatin. So they made it sound like regardless of whatever way they decide to go, that will be an option that they will be going with.
And it won't go through the hub downtown? You go from Oregon City to Tualatin without having to go back downtown?
Right. And it was interesting, the findings that they presented to us was that in Clackamas County, in the areas where you generally wouldn't think of really high maximum ridership, in these last few months, our area has seen the least amount of hit to ridership. And so it's proven pretty stable in our area heading out of the pandemic. We talked a little bit about the Oregon City Transit Center expansion. There's work being done with Congressman Schrader and trying to get that moving forward so that we can do some upgrades and capacity improvements to the transit center. And then lastly, we heard just a very, very quick update about the supportive housing services bond, and that things are moving forward, dollars are flowing in.
I hope we get some. I wish the apartment complex across from the high school was going to be not market rate, but it is. So it's unfortunate. But anyway, all right, so Clackamas C4 or subcommittee, Mr. O'Donnell.
If they had a meeting, I didn't attend it, so.
Okay, all right. There really is anything going on with the I-5, 205, excuse me, not I-5. Whew, I wish it was I-5, tolling diversion committee.
The meeting that we had scheduled in between our last update was canceled. So
Okay.
I will update on the next one.
Okay. CHP.
Not a lot. They're doing, working on staffing, school groups going through, and trying to get ready to open to the public, hopefully.
Yeah, it's amazing that we keep hearing about all these jobs that are available, but we can't get people to apply for the jobs. All right, Clackamas Water Environmental Services Policy Committee, and I have to ask, with your approval, I would like to take this over from Commissioner Smith, if you guys will approve that. I know we can't sort of approve it, but will you tacitly approve my going to those meetings in the future rather than Commissioner Smith? He's ready to give it up, so we're not voting, but if you say generally just go for it, I will do that.
I'm just surprised with his great love of that Commissioner Smith is prepared to give it up, but if he is, I'll abide by it.
I had to pay him off to get him off it, so.
I think Frank should do it.
I'm willing to do it. So, sounds like I'm going to be doing it, so we'll let whoever we need to know that they need to let me know when they meet.
Did you watch the Will Smith video at all?
You mean getting slammed? No, I did not watch that. So I just gave my report on the Downtown Oregon City Association. What I have been doing with them is that the block that I canvassed with Mr. Graham some months ago has bared some fruit, so I've canvassed it again, handing out posters to people, introducing myself to the business owners. So my block is from 7th to 6th, both sides of the street, and I've met some very amazing people, and I'm going to just keep doing that as I cruise my way downtown. MPAC. So the latest on that is that I signed on to a letter on our behalf with advice of Mr. Conkle, basically asking for a delay to the Department of Land Conservation Development Commission regarding the climate-friendly legislation that came out, which is yet another mandate. I don't disagree with it. I disagree with the timing. We are not done with House Bill 2001 implementation, and that's basically what most of the mayors and the other cities have said. We just can't. Please give us a break. We need to push this out some more so that we can actually finish one project before they give us something else to do. Impact, that was pretty much it. We did have a presentation from several homeless providers, houseless providers from the city of Portland, and I've watched almost all of the meeting that I missed because I had to go to South Fork. And I've got one more staff person to listen to, and that's from the transition projects, and that's the one I was most interested in, so I haven't completed that. OC 2040, we haven't had a meeting, but it's coming back to us and the city commission and the planning commission, so that'll get moving. Gentlemen, so you're up on the next one. So I believe you have a meeting coming up on the 22nd.
22nd, Frank attended there was a subcommittee at the library,
Yeah.
and I was with Parks doing master plan meetings, so I didn't go to the subcommittee.
Yeah.
I also didn't have a notice of it, but Frank went.
Yeah, I can give you a brief take on that. That was attended by myself, Kurt Decker from Energy Kayaking, Eric Gibson, he's a Jerry Herman intern. Jerry was there, Thelma from Slowpo Tours, and Susan Baxter Harwell, who's, I think, supervising Monty Woods, which is Metro. And what we discussed was, it was primarily focused on river assets and aquatic assets. There was some talk about bike trails. I didn't realize they had bike trails in the canyon, supposedly to ride, so I haven't been there.
The Metro, Mill Creek.
The Metro,
Park,
yeah,
yes.
that they do have bike trails.
Yes. There's a bike-only path, and we asked the pedestrians and stuff to stay the heck off of that.
Yeah.
And they can't go on the pedestrian side either.
So we talked about marine offerings, which I'm strong. I really wanted to see, the offerings for kayaking, guided fishing trips in the area, guided float trips down to Clackamas perhaps. There's people that'll be retiring from law enforcement that might want to offer those in the future. We talked about commercial vehicles.
It's that emerging business thing that's going on here. That's okay. That sounds reasonable. Might be one of those entrepreneurial loans that we're talking about. There we go. Okay. First customer.
We talked again about commercial vehicles and vessels coming to Oregon City. And there are some that already exist that have the capacity of 35 to 40 and fit within the existing parameters. Although we'd like to work our way through this 60-foot, 60-ton limitation. And we're working through the engineering aspects of that and the political aspects of it. We talked about our art and history offerings and providing these boat operators could provide ground transportation if we did the things we talked about tonight, like standardizing hours of operation and ticketing. So it was a pretty good discussion. A lot of it, again, was aspirational, but there's things in there that we can achieve if we just say, let's achieve this. We need to have a conversation with these boat operators, these commercial operators, and say, what's economically feasible for you? What kind of, do you need 30, 40, 50? So I think there's things to be pursued, and I like the conversation. I felt it had good possibilities, but we need to bring them to fruition and not just talk about them. So that's where that meeting was at.
Okay. Obviously, we're not meeting with the Oregon City Westland Pedestrian Bicycle Bridge Concept Project because we had our joint meeting with the City of Westland. We have agreed that we are not going to do anything at this time generally it was agreement that we would not do anything at this time to amend our TSPs to include this because there were many more questions that needed to be answered. So that's kind of where we are on that. We were all there, and thank you all for participating in that. I have heard nothing but good kudos from all the council members, including Todd Jones, who was not here in person and missed out on the pizza, which he said, how come he didn't get any pizza? I said, well, you got to show up. So we made a good impression. All of our staff was also appreciated. So thank you, everybody that was here that night. I think when I heard Mayor Walters say this was the best meeting she had been to in a long time, it made me think, like, what the heck are the Westland meetings like? If you said that was the best meeting she ever had. But I took it as a compliment. So just want you to know that they're still talking about it. And you were mentioned several times, Tony, about your support and help to everybody. Right. South Fork. So I attended my first meeting and I got railroaded into being the vice chair by Director Parno, which there will be, if you're listening to this, Wyatt, there's payback coming. So it was very informative. We had quite a recitation by Alice Richmond.
Was her birthday?
Was her birthday, which I understand this is a regular occurrence. So that was
her birthday, or
no, her birthday and her citizen comment.
Diatribes.
Yes, her citizen comment. So it was A good time was had by all. As you know, the gentlemen to my right are going to the, what is it, the ACS conference?
Yeah, ACE, or American
ACE
Water
Conference,
Works Association Conference in San Antonio next
Yes.
week.
So yes, we'll be looking forward to some interesting information, and whatever swag you can put in your bag for Mr. Morrow and I, it would be much appreciated, because, we can't go because we're here, we're running the show. Anything else you want to add?
Yeah, I would add something to that. I would just point out to the community that today they did training on both of the vehicles that provide emergency water services in the event of a disruption.
Yes, I received some photographs of that.
Right, so that's
Very nice.
important for people to know. We have two vehicles, both prepared to provide that service in an emergency.
Yeah, so that was very good.
Yep.
All right, Willamette Falls and Landings Heritage Area on June 14th, the organization will be celebrating century businesses, and some of them are even beyond century businesses. I'm working on an op-ed to go into the paper. We have a number of businesses who've been in business over 100 years in Oregon City, including Oregon City Garbage, Bush Furniture, the 505 Tavern, believe it or not, Midway Tavern, several of our lovely eating and drinking establishments. So we have a number of businesses. So some of them are going to be getting awards that night. I don't know exactly who's going to be getting the award, but they're holding it in Canby on the 14th. I hope to attend. West Willamette Legacy Project Liaison, I don't believe we have anything to report on that.
No, we don't.
Okay. Mr. Band, do you have any exciting news for us? Oh, yes,
nice.
yes. And I believe we all got an invitation. I think we got one from Kristen Brown for us to attend. Anything new in the world of city recorder?
EOT.
Oh, EOT.
The Oregon Trail.
Yeah, EOT.
August 2nd.
Yeah,
Okay,
August 2nd.
awesome.
And it's like at 5-ish, starts at 5-ish, I think. I know they usually,
5:30 to 8.
5:30 to 8, yeah.
Cool.
Anything new in the world of city recorder-ish? Okay, good. Our money's still in the bank, so we're all good. All right, thumbs up. All right, being that there is no further business, unless anybody wants to add anything, I will call this meeting adjourned, and thank you so much for your attendance.